Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Florida Abuse Authority monthly board meeting. Beautiful day outside, and we're here doing the people's business. Call the meeting to order. I would ask Council Member Nancy Amadeo if she would do the honor of leading us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
You join me in the pledge? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Nancy. We will soon be going to closed session. In closed session, we have a conference with legal counsel about existing litigation, Government Code 54956.9 Alpha, 2 cases. Keep Florida Wild versus Florida Abuse Authority, case number M114961, and City of Marina versus Florida Abuse Authority, case number M11856. Prior to going into closed session, is there any member of the public that wishes to address the board on any of these 2 items we'll be discussing in closed session? Saying none, then we will be adjourning an open session and reconvening closed session next door. We'll be back as soon as we can. Thank you. Let's get started. Ladies and gentlemen, let's get started. I'm reconvening the Florida Abuse Authority Board of Directors meeting. If our council could announce the action taken in closed session, please.
Yes, thank you, Chair Edelin. The board met in closed session and discussed the items at 3A, I, and II, and conferred with council, heard from him, and there is nothing to report out.
Thank you very much. If we could have roll call now, please.
City of Carmel by the Sea, Mayor Pro Tem Beach.
Here.
City of Delray Oaks, Chair Edelin.
Here.
City of Marina, Councilmember Amadeo.
Here.
City of Monterey, Councilmember Selfridge.
Here.
Monterey County Supervisor Potter. Here. Monterey County Supervisor Calcagno. Monterey County Supervisor Parker. City of Pacific Grove, Councilmember Lucius.
Here.
City of Salinas, Mayor Gunter.
Here.
City of Sand City, Mayor Pendergrass. Here. City of Seaside, Mayor Rubio. Here. City of Seaside, Mayor Pro Tem Oglesby.
Here.
20th Congressional District, Alec Arago. 17th State Senate District, Nicole Charles. 29th State Assembly District, Taina Vargas Edmond. University of California, Donna Blitzer. California State University, Eduardo Ochoa. Monterey Peninsula College, Walter Tribley. Monterey Peninsula Unified School District, Leslie Codian. Monterey Salinas Transit, Mike Gallant. Transportation Agency of Monterey County, Debbie Hale.
Here.
United States Army, Dan Carpenter. Fort Ord BRAC Office, Bill Collins. Marina Coast Water District, Director Moore.
Here.
Chair Edelin, you have a quorum.
Thank you very much. Our executive officer had stepped out for a second, so let's skip down to his consent agenda. Any member of the board wish to pull any items from the consent agenda for clarification or questions? Saying none, out to the public. Any member of the public wishing to pull any items for clarification, questions? Saying none, back to the board. I'd entertain a motion, please.
So moved.
Okay, Councilmember Lucius motions for approval of the consent agenda, and Mayor Rubio is the second. Any discussion on the motion? All in favor? Yes, I'm sorry. Councilmember Amadeo.
I just need to, I need to abstain from A, B, C, and D.
Okay, the council member abstains from A, B, C, and D. Okay, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you very much. Next, we will go back to acknowledgments, announcements, correspondence with our executive officer, Michael.
Yes, Chair Edelin, members of the board. First, I'd like to make sure that the public, as well as the board members, are aware that any comments that folks have for the state of California on the Veterans Cemetery environmental documents, that you're aware that that deadline was extended to July 18th. I know there are members of the public here who have written to the state for their environmental documents with some questions and concerns, and wanted to make sure that the others knew that. Second, Senator Bill Monning and Congressman Zanfar both have joined together to hold a town hall meeting that's going to be 9 a.m. tomorrow morning in room B104 of Morse Hall in the Monterey Institute of International Studies to discuss cemetery issues. And finally, Members of the board were contacted this week about a potential rescheduling of the August meeting. This is all in line with attempting to schedule a speaker that will come and make a presentation to the board in a follow-up to the reassessment process and the colloquium. We actually are looking for a date in September now, and you'll hear from Lena about that this coming week.
Anything else? Okay, thank you very much. Okay, next we go to business items. First, Marina Salinas Multimodal Corridor Plan. Debbie, is Ariana going to give the presentation?
Yes.
Miss Ariana Green, good seeing you.
All right. I do have a PowerPoint presentation this afternoon. Good afternoon. I am Ariana Green. I'm a transportation planner with the Transportation Agency for Monterey County, and I'm here to provide you an update on the Marina Salinas Multimodal Corridor Plan, and we're also looking for support, thank you, support of the recommended alignment. Many of you have already heard this presentation, so I will keep it brief. So the goals of this project, we have 2 phases. The first phase is to determine and preserve a multimodal corridor that's focused on regional high-quality transit. We're also looking at providing a regional bicycle route along the corridor and improving pedestrian safety along the corridor in the more urban areas. The second phase of the project, once we have gained support from all of our partner agencies as to the preferred alignment for the corridor, we will be looking at conceptual design and also some initial cost estimates. So a little bit of project history. The first mention of a multimodal corridor between Marina and Salinas was in the 1997 Corridor-Based Reuse Plan, which used Blanco Road and cut through some wildlife habitat through the former Fort Ord area to access Imgen Parkway. And there were some issues with that, namely the impacts to potential impacts to agricultural land and potential impacts to wildlife habitat. So all of the underlying jurisdictions got together and in 2010 signed a memorandum of agreement to realign the corridor to use Inter-Garrison Road. And so when we started our process, we started off by using the 2010 alignment that used Inter-Garrison Road. And when we did our initial outreach to the stakeholder groups and the underlying jurisdictions, some issues came up. One was some concerns regarding impacts to CSUB campus. They're really focusing on developing a pedestrian and bicycle-friendly campus core, and so there's some concerns about cut-through traffic. Another development that's happened since 2010 is the Whispering Oaks development was not approved by the County Board of Supervisors, so that was one. That development would have been one benefit to locating routing the corridor along Inter-Garrison Road, which is no longer a consideration, at least not at this time. And then lastly, the 2010 Memorandum of Agreement and that alignment did not address how the corridor would access Salinas. So with this information, we reevaluated all of the potential ways to get between Marina and Salinas. And with much stakeholder input, including those from all of the partner agency groups, all the jurisdictions, representatives from the agricultural community, business community, students, and others, and general members of the public, we came up with this recommended alignment instead. The recommended alignment shown in the dark black line, and it starts at the proposed light rail station at 8th Street and continues on 8th Street, pops up to 2nd Avenue in Marina, and then continues along Imgen Parkway through Marina to Reservation Road, and continues down Reservation Road through the East Garrison development and back up South Davis Road to access Salinas via West Alisal and Lincoln Avenue, which will provide access to the future intermodal transportation center, the rail station Salinas. So you can see there are a couple of dash lines The dashed line in gray along Inner Garrison Road is the 2010 route, and we just wanted to recognize that route and show the difference between what was proposed then and what's proposed now. And then the other dashed line along Blanco Road is an interim route, and we've designated this as an interim route in recognition that it might take quite some time to widen the roadways along Reservation Road and Davis Road to build the long-term or the recommended alignment. So the interim alignment would not entail would not include any roadway widening, but it would focus primarily on improvements for transit along at the intersections of Blanco Road and Davis Road and Blanco Road and Reservation Road, and also look at improving the bicycle route along Blanco Road as well. So the recommended alignment provides access to multiple land uses that are support transit. On the west end of the corridor would provide direct access to the Dunes development, the Veterans Affairs Clinic, the shopping center that's currently there, and additional jobs and housing within that development. I would also provide access to senior housing and the Veterans Affairs Transition Clinic Center along Imgen Parkway, and then it would also provide a really important future transit connection along the Monterey branch line. And currently, MST is looking at the feasibility of building a bus-only lane along the existing railroad tracks, which would provide a connection from the former Fort Ord area all the way down the peninsula, which is a pretty exciting notion. So this is the recommended alignment, and I just also wanted to touch on the existing transit network, because this corridor is focused on providing a regional transit corridor and a transit route. A lot of questions or concerns have come up in our outreach as to, is this going to be the only route that transit's going to take in the future? And the answer is no. There are all of these existing local transit routes which will feed into the multimodal corridor route and be supported by the multimodal corridor route. So that's an important point that I just wanted to make and sort of clarify, is that even though the multimodal corridor route, we're recommending to move it away from Inner Garrison Road, there would still be local transit service along Inner Garrison Road and between CSUMB campus and the housing east of campus. And then with this new alignment, there are some policy considerations. This new alignment would need to be mentioned or identified in the Fort Ord Habitat Conservation Plan and the Fort Ord Base Reuse Plan. Excuse me. So our project schedule, we're currently wrapping up our gaining consensus and support for the preferred alignment. We've already gained support from the City of Marina, the City of Salinas, County Planning Commission, County Board of Supervisors, TAMC Board. So it's you guys, and then next week it's MST, and then we'll conclude phase 1 of this project and get to move on to the design phase, which I'm really excited about. So we're looking at holding another round of community workshops in September, late August maybe, that focuses on design. And we hope to conclude our report by the end of this year. And again, the action today is to receive the update on the Marina Salinas Multimodal Corridor Plan and provide support for the recommended corridor alignments. And that concludes my presentation.
Thank you, Ariana. A very good briefing. Any questions by members of the board? Yes, Victoria.
Thank you, Ariana, for that presentation. I just have been meaning to better understand myself visually, and I apologize for not knowing this yet, exactly how the efforts at on campus with the Cal State studies, and I know the city of Marina has been working hard to coordinate with you all. That, what do they call it, 4-tag project? Do you know what I'm talking about? The one that's called the spleen, or just the maps that the faculty at Cal State have been working on. How does that coordinate with the current proposal of multimodal corridor?
Right. So in our outreach efforts, we did hear from several different groups a concern about the spleen and providing a green corridor between the former Fort Ord area and the Fort Ord Dunes State Beach. And so what our corridor basically avoids the spleen, but what we've also talked about is focusing on providing bicycle and pedestrian connections along Inner Garrison Road that would connect to the multimodal corridor. But ultimately, the route that we're proposing sort of avoids any conflicts with what's been talked about so far.
That's good to hear. Do you have a laser pointer there with you, Ariana? Because if you don't mind backing up a little bit and just educating, sorry if you'll indulge me for a second, just so I really understand, just wave it in the general location of what you're avoiding, if you don't mind.
Sure. So the spleen area, I mean, it's a very conceptual concept, and but it's generally, this area here.
Okay.
And
so the gray dashed might have had something to do with it, but the rerouting along the solid black avoids it. Okay.
Correct.
Got it. Thank you.
Yes, Councilmember Almadeo.
Thank you, Chair. My question is, when this came before the City of Marina, the one concern I had was the corner of Imgen and 2nd Avenue, because 2nd Avenue is a 2-lane road and is built on 3 corners. Mm-hmm. And the comment was, although there's no design yet, obviously, that would be addressed in the design phase. So my question is, if we give approval for this and it goes forward, and you cannot design the turn from Imgen either direction onto 2nd Avenue for the bus rapid transit lanes, because that was the whole idea, is that you would have dedicated bus lanes. Obviously, they wouldn't be on 2nd Avenue, but they would be on Imgen. Would that negate this plan and we'd be starting over again, or would we do some sort of an alternate route that hadn't been developed, taking into consideration the spleen? What would be the alternative if engineering isn't able to work out that intersection?
I'm going to defer to Debbie here.
Oh, okay. I know that Ariana's been talking with our engineers a lot about the various tight spots in the corridor.
Right.
And I know that they're looking in more detail, but we've kind of held them off on greater detail. But in spots where it's simply not wide enough to have a bus-only lane, and there might not be very many spots where it's wide enough to have a bus-only lane, we still feel that there's tremendous improvements that can be made at intersections, giving bus priority. For instance, in the Jazz line corridor, they've been able to improve travel times, as much as 20%, more than that. And so we don't see that as a make or break type of a situation. But we do know that we're going to be spending some money taking a look at that particular intersection, and I know there's a couple other intersections we're going to be taking some extra time to take a look at. So we won't be redesigning the corridor because of that, but we may be choosing different improvements based on the constraints.
Thank you.
Mayor Rubio.
Yes, Ariana, thank you for the presentation. I had a meeting with you and Debbie about this several months ago. I still have concerns. The MOU was put together by, after a lot of work, and that alignment was agreed to. And it just seems like the relook at this thing is staff-driven rather than by the members of the MOU. And I understand that you've done a lot of outreach. I just haven't seen any talk or talk about alternatives in terms of maybe rerouting through 8th Street to get across to Inner Garrison. When we talk about the ability to build lanes for bus only and for pedestrian and bicycle traffic, it seems to me that Inner Garrison provides much more opportunity to widen the road rather than Reservation or Blanco, because of the lands that are there and the constraints with the bridge. Now, of course, you're going to have to cross a bridge in either of these scenarios. So, I mean, that money's going to have to be expended. But the housing all along from CSUMB, the new housing, the north project, the existing housing that's just north of the campus, all that could be serviced, as well as the Schonover Park. All those folks that go back and forth would be serviced on Inner Garrison. That whole stretch from Imgen and Reservation all the way to Davis and Blanco, there's no housing, there's nothing there. There's no ability for, really activating the transit. All those people along Inner Garrison would have to backtrack to Imgen to access that transit corridor. It just seems counterintuitive. The fact that you have Inner Garrison that has the ability to be widened, it just makes a lot more sense to me to maintain that original alignment through the Inner Garrison corridor. You could still pick up all the stuff at the beginning of the Imgen, at the west end of it, come across 8th, and then really do a lot of activity for CSUMB. There's going to be people that live in Salinas need to access CSUMB, because a lot of students are from Salinas, and I think we're leaving out a segment of the population that really needs to be served.
President Ochoa.
Do I have to make a question, or can I make a comment?
Go ahead and make a comment.
Okay. Well, I just wanted to state that we very much prefer actually this new arrangement at CSUMB. In fact, we've already, you're probably aware, have put speed bumps on Inter-Garrison to try to slow down the traffic through our campus, because it really bifurcates the campus, and it does, as was mentioned earlier, kind of hamper our ability to create more of a pedestrian and bike-friendly campus, one where there's a greater density of buildings and activity to create that critical mass that a campus life requires. We think that our students are currently served adequately by other, by the lines that are currently in place without having this high-speed corridor added to it. So, we just wanted to endorse this arrangement as our preferred one.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
If I may add, we currently have daily service dedicated from CSUMB to Salinas for those students who live in that part of the valley. They have a route that actually operates when school is in session, runs daily, every single day, hourly service right now, and it's a pretty fast ride. So it's called the Line 25, and it takes part of Inner Garrison, and it actually penetrates through the East Campus area of Schoonover Park and Preston Park and Frederick Parks.
Thank you. Any other comments, questions by members of the board? Yes, Councilmember Ogilvie.
I guess it's just a comment. I guess I agree with the Mayor Rubio. And what I heard was we just switched to the new route to go around CSUMB, and it seemed like a long way to go just to make sure we don't go through them. I agree we shouldn't go through them, but I think it's a long way to go around, and I just wanted to be on the record. It seems as though that's the only reason, and I'm not going to say it's not a good reason. I just wanted to be on the record. That seems to be the only reason. I think that's the only one you mentioned. Did you?
No, actually, the new recommended alignment serves a lot more regional destinations than the inter-garrison route.
Any other comments, questions by board members? Yes, sir.
Yeah, I'll just go on record as saying the new alignment will bring probably more access to our Marina campus, the MPC's Marina campus, and we would endorse the new alignment.
Thank you. Other questions, comments, board members? Yes, Tom.
So just, it seems as though, given the development in East Garrison, which is the most recent movement that seems to be going on, that and somewhat of the dunes, that this new alignment would better serve East Garrison, certainly the dunes area. And I would expect the possibility, too, of an increase in traffic between Salinas and the Monterey Peninsula going forward in the future, at least in part as a consequence of the fact that it is going to be more difficult for service workers to sustain housing on the Monterey Peninsula when water costs there are going to be going up substantially with the new desalination project. So that's likely to drive a higher volume of traffic from Salinas to the peninsula, and being able to move that traffic more quickly seems like would be a smart idea.
Any other questions, comments by board members? I just had one comment, and that is if you look at the old inter-garrison alignment, if you look at the map there, it really does direct traffic more towards Seaside and Delray Oaks, which would actually favor our environment. The new orientation favors CSUMB and it favors Marina. I've had a look at it myself. I think I'm going to throw in with the new alignment only because I think it meets a greater good for the overall community. But again, Marina is being favored and CSUMB is being favored because of growth and things like that. So I don't want to favor Marina too much in all of this. I thought I'd throw that in there just to show how we're favoring Marina in this regard. Okay, out to the public. Any members of the public wishing to make any comments?
Good afternoon. I'm Levon Stone, the Executive Director of the FORA Environmental Justice Network. I'd like to know what process you're using to talk with the public or engage the public in these decisions concerning transportation, because I don't recall getting anything about dates, times, or places concerning the problem of transportation. I remember standing here once before talking about the traffic going through the cities, Seaside and Marina, and at the work, before work, how backed up the traffic is. And we're also talking about the conditions of the smog from these vehicles. And the fact that transportation has been rerouted from some of the areas, poor areas of the cities or the peninsula, for people who are not in the circle of decision making. And we're still dealing with those problems. Even transportation as far as people trying to get to work, single mothers, or even married parents or whatever who don't have good transportation. Most of the activities, like I said, have moved to Salinas, and all of the governmental, the courts, everything is in Salinas. And most of the job creation centers or job activities have moved to Salinas. So we're still having some very gross transportation problems with people getting around and being able to get to their appointments because of the lack of good transportation. Even those who have to work out of town, there is no real connection for these people. And it sounds like most of the transportation activity is geared toward the university and developments coming into our community that only serve to hire a very small number of people from the local residents who have lost jobs. So we need to be able to serve our communities, serve the local communities, and not just overlook and gross over what those needs are. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Next speaker, please.
When this presentation was made at the Denise Turley. When this presentation was made at the City of Marina, a question that was floating around the room that I don't know, I know I put on a piece of paper and shoved it towards Debbie is, well, I have 3 questions. So the first one here, it says Intermodal Center planned at 8th and 1st. And we were talking about 2nd, so I'm not sure whether 1st is a mistake or maybe it's going to be both on 1st and 2nd. So that's question number 1. Question number 2 that I didn't get answered is where do we have access to these maps? So now that it's part of a FORA now it's part of a FORA presentation, I can go on the FORA website and get this, or is it only on the TAMC website, and how do we access that? And then question number 3 is, so the interchange onto the freeway at Imjim Parkway at commute time is miserable, and the comment was that the regional impacts had not been taken into account. The traffic being from Salinas through Imjim Parkway there, and if anybody isn't paying attention, that traffic is terrible both ways. That freeway for both commute hours, morning and afternoon, is a parking lot. So I'm hoping that I don't know that this project touches on that, but you can have the fastest bus in the world, and if you haven't addressed those issues, that bus is going to sit just like us cars do. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Next public speaker.
Hi, Margaret Davis. I strongly endorse this brilliant realignment and hope that the FORA board will as well. There have been multiple changes in the City of Marina development since 2010, and this alignment is far more in keeping with the needs of the City of Marina. Gives access to the dunes, the VA clinic, the wellness center, planned hotels, senior housing as you're going east, airport and MBEST, MPC properties, help CSUMB, and is also helpful for local marina residents who are working class people and will be availing themselves of this transportation system, and preserves the concept and the eventual working out of the whole spleen concept. So I urge you to please endorse this alignment. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Any other public speakers? Seeing none, public comment period's closed. To answer some of the questions, the maps will be on the FORA website. They should be up fairly shortly. So if you want to see these maps, get copies of them, go to our FORA website. Ariana, there were some other questions taken. If you could answer the others. One was about how we engage the public with regard to input.
Sure. Great. We held a couple of community workshops back in February, which were advertised on our website, and we also asked all of our partner agencies to help advertise the meetings. We've also had meetings with special interest groups, and we've had meetings with we've had multiple public hearings that are advertised in multiple ways, and we will make even a stronger effort in the next phase of this project, but we have done significant stakeholder outreach.
Did you get the other questions too?
So the second speaker, I didn't get the first question.
One was about 8th Street and 8th and 1st versus 8th and 2nd.
8th and 1st.
So there's we didn't bring the slide here because it starts to get into real specifics, but We have had on TMC property plans for an MST transit facility. We've actually talked about swapping property with MST when that area of Marina starts to develop. And so that's the transit center that we're referring to. But if it sounds like a transit center that doesn't exist, that's correct. It doesn't exist now. And so if we're thinking about, isn't it on 2nd Avenue there, it's actually at First Street, right adjacent to the freeway. And then the other question I heard didn't really relate so much to this study, was about IMGEN and
Right.
Highway 1 interchange improvements, and we're well aware of the issues there and have been talking with the City of Marina and Caltrans about how to try to address those improvements and fund them. And by the way, we will make sure that the maps are up on our website.
They
if
are
they're
up there. The
not
maps are currently
already.
up on the TAMC website, and we have a project page for this project. Which is
Well, yeah, we can
Sounds
email.
good. Thank you very much.
great.
Okay, back to the board. Any further discussion, or we're being asked to support the TAMC recommended corridor alignment? So I would entertain a motion on that if.
So moved.
Okay, we have a motion by Supervisor Potter to support, and a second by Mayor Gunter. A discussion on the motion? Councilmember Amadeo.
I would just like to comment that I don't have a problem with the realignment. Most of my questions have been answered. However, I am concerned that we have several now major road constructions that have been done in order to ease traffic, but they don't intersect with one another. General Jim Moore doesn't intersect with the multimodal corridor, so the feeding doesn't take us to a specific, there's no crossroads, so people have to wind around in order to get to that next very important means of getting from point A to point B. And I hope that TAMC will be looking at that in the future as to how we make better connections between the multimodal corridor, between General Jim Moore, and any other major road system on the former Fort Ord that is supposed to be designed to ease traffic, but I think there's an important component that's being left out.
Thank you. Any other discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Anybody opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you very much. Much appreciated. Next, 8B, approve of the Preston Park fiscal year 2014-15 annual budget. Michael, take it away.
Yes, Chair Edelin, members of the board, this is the third time this has been on your agenda, and as a consequence, members of the board have reviewed past versions, have asked questions of the FORA staff. We have attempted to respond to those in the attachments that have been revised to address those questions, and Jonathan Garcia will do a PowerPoint presentation that hopefully addresses each of the questions we've received about the rent increases and about the capital improvement program at Preston Park that's included in these two parts of this budget.
Thank you. Good afternoon, members of the board. I'm here to present the 2014-15 Preston Park budget. The requested action today of the board is to approve the operating budget, which includes a 2.4% rent increase, and also the capital expenditure budget, which is for ongoing repairs and maintenance of the asset. The FY 14-15 Preston Park budget accomplishes a number of things. It meets the FORA board policies to sustain Preston Park as a quality residential community. The capital expenditures finish the planned work and restore the reserves for the replacement reserves. And it maintains the FORA policy to keep the rents near the area market rates. Just a recent history of past rent adjustments approved at Preston Park. In August 2010, there was a 1.8% increase based on area consumer price index. In August 2011, there was no increase. In August 2012, that increase was delayed until February 2013. It was a 3% increase based on consumer price index. And then in 2013, there was a rent increase in September of 2.4% based on the consumer price index. And just a little more background on how the rents are calculated or how this revenue is collected. So the main revenue factors at Preston Park are the market rents collected from the tenants. Also, the county Housing Authority has Section 8 program that renters there have the Section 8 vouchers, which contribute towards the rents there. And then there are miscellaneous charges to the tenants at Preston Park. And then just a little background on on how the formula works for making rent increases for the in-place tenants. It's capped at 3%, but it's based on consumer price index. So the maximum increase is 3% in a year at Preston Park. Just a little background on how the rental market has been surveyed. The average market occupancy just in the area has been 98% over the past year. The average rents per square foot in the area vary between $1.27 per square foot to $1.97 per square foot. And Preston Park, in comparison, is 99% occupied as of July 7th. And the average rent per square foot at Preston Park, the incoming market rents are $1.29 per square foot. Just a little bit of detail on the two types of units in Preston Park. There are actually within the two-bedroom housing, there's different types of those two-bedroom units, but on average, the current residents pay between $1,236 per month to $1,756 per month, and that averages out to $1,459 when you compare all the two-bedroom units. And then at the move-in rental rates, it's $1,713 per month. So that's a difference between the average and that move-in rate of $254 per month. And the average increase for an in-place resident would range from $29 to $41 per month. On the three-bedroom side, the rents are higher for those units. The current in-place tenants pay between $1,535 to $2,058 per month. Their average rental rate is $1,572, which it just indicates there's a lot of current in-place tenants there. The move-in rate is $2,047 per month. And so the variance between the new move-ins and the average in-place rent is $475 per month. The increase for in-place tenants would range between $36 per month and $48 per month. Okay, then just looking at the area median income and how that compares to rents at Preston Park. So in Monterey County, the median income for 2014 is $68,700 per year. It's based on a 4-person household. And for rent or household expenditures for housing, its affordable range is typically 33% of income, which would be $1,889 per month based on that median income. In Preston Park, approximately 90% of the rentals are at that $1,889 cost per month, and that's including after the 2.4% proposed increase. So just to note that with this increase, 90% of Preston Park would still be within that 33% of median income affordability. A little more detail on the housing market in Marina. Over the past year, from May 2013, the rental rates have risen 9.4% based on surveys. The trend has been that other communities are starting to renovate the interiors and increasing rent in some of their communities. And what's been happening in the affordable housing areas on the base on Fort Ord, there's the 66 units of affordable housing at Manzanita Place in East Garrison, 108 units at the University Village has just started renting through the South County Housing Project just on 2nd Avenue. And then the Rock Rose Garden on Lexington Court is going to provide another 21 units of affordable housing. Looking at green initiatives, there's ongoing water and energy saving initiatives at Preston Park. Includes PG&E weatherization program, which is a no-cost program to below market or Section 8 residents. There's water conservation programs through MCWD and PG&E, and there's appliance buyback program. Looking at the summary of the budget, attachment F to the staff report includes operating expense projections and shows the percentage changes between the last budget and this proposed budget. And then overall, the operating costs are 10.1% higher than the 2013-14 actual. And just to note that the capital expenditures provide value to the community and improve the living conditions or experience at the community. So back to the requested action is to approve the operating budget, which would include a 2.4% rent increase, and the capital expenditure budget to maintain the asset. And Alliance staff is also here to address questions.
Thank you, Jonathan. Any questions by board members? Yes, Councilmember Lucius.
Thank you. If I could just get a clarity on a couple of questions, because there is a difference between the proposed rent increase of the 2.4% increase and the move-in rents. So one question is, are the move-in rents also being increased? And then along with that, in the staff report, it sounded like there were two recommendations. One was to accept the increase of 2.4%, which would generate $169,000 in revenue, but there would be, if that increase didn't take place, there would still be revenue generated from the new move-ins. And the difference wasn't very much. It was a difference of about $28,000. So I guess, again, just some clarity on that. Is it really just a $28,000 increase or a $28,000 difference? Because it sounds like much of the goal could be accomplished without the rent increase just through the revenue from the new move-ins. And then the final question through the chair would be if you could just speak to the difference between market rent and fair market rent. I think those are the terms that are used. Thank you.
So the first question about the new move-ins and the difference in the proposed increase is for in-place tenants. So everyone that is in place in Preston Park would be affected by the rental increase. New move-in does not have that. It's based on a market survey. So they have to be in place until the next increase happens, and they would be affected if a future increase happens in a year. The question on the 28,000 difference between implementing a 2.4% increase or not, that is the difference in the budget for this year, but when you compound it over a number of years, it does escalate. So if you're not increasing rents, then in 5 years from now, you would not be collecting approximately $140,000 in rents over that time period. So increasing rents on a regular annual basis helps to maintain the asset. So as costs increase for maintenance, you're covered with sufficient rental revenue. And the question about the difference between market rents and fair market rents. So my understanding is fair market rents are published through the Housing Authority, the County of Monterey. So those are based throughout Monterey County, and the market rents at Preston Park are determined through a market survey based on comparable properties within Seaside, Marina, and other markets just in this area.
Other questions by board members? Yes. Councilmember Selfridge.
Yes, I've been contacted by the Residents Association, and first of all, they felt that they had not had time to meet with their representatives and people from the Housing Authority to answer many of their questions that they've had that haven't been answered sufficiently for them yet. They also have some concern about the affordable housing part of Preston Park and how this will affect those units.
So the question about how the affordable housing rents are established That is through, it's at Preston Park, there's 51 deed restricted units that are rented based on affordable housing rates that are published on a county by county basis. So those won't be affected by a rent increase. They're established annually. And the question about interaction with the Tenants Association, I believe Mr. Norris did meet with the Tenants Association this year to receive feedback on the budget. So I don't have more detail on that question, but I just know that a meeting did occur.
I'm sorry, did you say that you did not know if Alliance had met with the Residents Association or not?
Yeah, we'll let Alliance address the question.
We did meet with the Tenants Association in May. We met one time. We typically do meet twice, and during this process, we were only able to meet once this year.
So some of the questions that they've had
Have been
in
answered.
the near future have not been answered yet?
I actually have been in contact with people from the Residents Association. One of them is here, and I'm sure that she'll go ahead and address any questions that haven't been answered fully. But we have tried to address questions as they come up, even outside of those regular meetings.
Other question by board? Yes, Mayor Pro Tem Oglesby.
I thank the chair. Going back, oh, excuse me, my back is hurting.
Heavy load.
That's probably why I was a little evil earlier. But going back to affordability, it's just, you said you have 51 units that's deed restricted, so their increase is not going up. But then you said after this increase, 90% of Preston Park's affordable medium income families will be able to afford it. 90%. What happens to the other 10%? Does that mean they cannot afford this increase? And where do they go?
So the interpretation may have gotten a little muddled. What the slide was supposed to show is that for market rate housing, even with this particular increase, 90% of the populace of Preston Park would still be below a rental amount of $1,800. So there are 10% of the community that, after this increase, would be above that median income. That doesn't have anything to do with affordable housing, and it doesn't have anything to do with Section 8 housing. Those specific residents are not the below market housing. We're not proposing a rent increase at this time because the rents are as high as they can go. Section 8 housing residents, we are asking for a minor increase, but their rents have been not reduced, but they have been held over for 3 or 4 years. They have not received any increases, and their rents are well depressed from the market rate in Preston Park.
But they won't go above the market rate.
No, they will not. There's no possible way that they could.
And then what about what about the ones that are right at 33% of their income now?
Those folks would be pushed over with a 2%, 2.4% increase, but again, it's a very minor portion of the population, and those residents are the most recent residents who have moved into the community. Long-term residents are nowhere near that point.
Okay.
Other questions by board members? Seeing none, let's go out to the public. Any questions by members of the public?
Comments. Levon Stone, Executive Director, FORA and Environmental Justice Network. That housing was created in kind of a hurry as the answer to a 12-year-old committed suicide because his parents couldn't find housing. The housing is not up to par. There are conditions in the housing that is causing diseases. The sign used to be posted by the post office. It says living here can cause cancers, birth defects, and other diseases. Now, that is not common for a housing area, and that has been ignored and is still being ignored. And the people, there's 50 units out of the whole housing area that is Section 8, and even Section 8 has been increased. the fact that we are in a very economically stressed county is not being looked at. Those figures do not correspond with the wages that people are making and the lack of wage increases, livable wage jobs. That needs to be looked at. We say it over and over again. I know it's not going to make a bit of difference after I sit down, but that is still the situation today, and it needs to be reckoned with. The security in that area has been very, very bad. I know. I lived there as a military spouse and afterwards for many years. And what is being quoted right now with the rents going up every year, in 2010, the rents was over $1,400 for a 3-bedroom. And to say that this is all that is happening now when the rents are being raised every single year with a situation that we have is not caring for families. And our community is being replaced by people coming in. Nobody is saying what is happening to those people. Most of them military families, family members or whatever that was living in Preston Park. Nobody is saying what is happening to those people who cannot afford to stay and pay those prices. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Next speaker, please.
Christy Markey with Supervisor Jane Parker's office, and Supervisor Parker would just like to ask her colleagues on the board to not raise the rents on the residents of Preston Park. A lot of the folks living there really can't afford this rent increase, and this board has been raising their rents steadily for a number of years now. There have been some comparable studies done by the company that runs Preston Park, and they've tried to demonstrate on paper that this would be a fair rental increase based on comparables in the market. And I'm not going to get into the details of that because it gets quite detailed, but it's actually not a fair rent increase in the comps. Some of the comps, they don't consider some of the utility costs that you have at Preston Park that are unique because they're in the Ord water community. We don't know how many people living in Preston Park actually even make the median income. You know, so there's a slide up there that says the median income is of the population is X, and this rent would be affordable for 90% of those people. That has nothing to do with the people living in Preston Park. A lot of those folks cannot afford this rent increase. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Next speaker, please.
My observation from having lived in Abrams Park and seeing what goes on in that area, this is not tip-top housing. It is not of the finest. A lot of the people there are barely hanging on, and they can't afford these regular rent increases. But the question is, where are lower-income people supposed to live, if not places like Preston Park? They have to live somewhere. And I ask you to refrain from raising their rent. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Next speaker, please.
Good afternoon, Denise Turley, Tenants Association. So I went last because a lot of the things I was going to say were said by other people. We ask that you not at this time approve the rent increase. Roofs went on. I was fortunate enough to get my roof on my birthday. So, but there is still a lot of more work to the property that needs to be done before we feel that the property really would be entitled to a rent increase. The revenues overperform and are underrepresented, so that $19,000 and how many ever dollars, that's not real money, that's paper money. We would ask, anyway, there still are, this was pulled from the agenda last time because there apparently were some errors. There still are some errors in here. I caught a couple minor ones in Jonathan's presentation that I haven't seen, that I would like to have seen a copy of that. And to my best knowledge, Mr. Norris was not at our one and only meeting, and perhaps he had a scheduling conflict or anything, but we left that meeting thinking we were going to have a second meeting. And I remember that you remember that there was that really bad flu. And so it just kept preventing us from having a second meeting. That should do it for today. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Any other members of the public wishing to address the board on this item? Saying none, public comment period is closed. Back to the board. Entertain final comment and or a motion with regard to the recommendation. Yes, Councilmember Lucius.
I just think something has to be addressed, which was made during public comment, was that there is a possibility of health and safety issues. Signs that say, you know, you could get cancer from living here. I don't know if those signs exist, if there are health and safety issues, but I think that's something we have to be aware of.
Comment.
By California law, we're required to post Prop 65 information in our office, which does state that we utilize chemicals on the facility that can cause cancer. It's something that every single property throughout California has to have. It's nothing specific to Preston Park.
Also, if you go in every Starbucks in the country, there's a sign as you walk in, coffee causes cancer. That's also required to be posted, so for whatever it's worth. Any other comments, or again, I'd entertain a motion? Yes.
Yes.
Councilmember Selfridge.
I do know that the residents that have contacted me felt that there was going to be another meeting where their questions would be answered, and I understand that second meeting has not happened, so they still have a lot of questions out there. So I would like to move at this time that we not approve the recommendation by the staff to increase the 2.4 rent increase. Attachments B and C.
We have a motion by Councilmember Selfridge not to accept the staff recommendation and not to approve the budget. The budget you're saying. Is there a second to that motion? Councilmember Lucius, any discussion on the motion? My only comment is yes. Yes, I'm sorry.
Is this a motion to postpone the decision to continue it so that the meetings can take place? Is that what it is, or is it a?
Yes, thank you for clarifying that. This would postpone the meeting, postpone the decision so the meeting of the residents with the management can happen, and I think some of our board members from Marina might go to those meetings also. I'm not positive on that, but to postpone. Thank you.
Yeah, my only comment is we've postponed this on the agenda now for 3 months, and every time we postpone it, there's less revenue coming in to be able to fund the base for use plan and all the other things that we use the money for. So, I mean, it's a decision by the council. And any other discussion? Yes, Mayor Pro Tem Oglesby.
We postponed it last time on the recommendation from the Marina representative, so I don't know what happened. I know right now I think the motion in affirmative is not going to pass, so take note on that. But let me make my comments, just two quick ones. You know, when we talk about low income and where these people are going to live if we continue to raise the rent, if we continue to not develop, then there's going to be no place for them to live. And so I think people are trying to have it both ways. They're trying to stop development, and then when it comes time to find places for these people to live, they ask them to come down here and say, hey, don't raise the rents, don't pay for this, don't pay for that, but at the same time, don't build, don't develop. And I see it in my community. If there's only a certain amount of homes left, then yeah, we're all going to be edged out, because there's people around the world that want to come live on this peninsula, and they're prepared to pay a higher price. And they're prepared to raise the price of other homes to increase the price on our low-income homes. So eventually we have to raise the price on low-income properties just to keep pace and just to keep maintenance up. So no one wants to raise or increase the price to price them out. But if we don't build, then they're going to be pushed out, and we're all going to be pushed out. So I'll wait for the vote through the chair.
Any other comment? Yes, Councilmember Amadeo.
Thank you, Chair. I noted in this, and it's highlighted where it says delaying the anticipated decision will cost $28,808 as the property will not be able to implement the rental increase until October 1st, 2014. That's if it's just delayed 1 month. When you continue to delay and delay, and it's already been delayed 3 times, that sounds like it's cost us close to $100,000. That could put a lot of roofs on buildings, make a lot of necessary repairs, could help FORA do the improvements that they are required to do through the CIP, and I'm not sure what we gain by waiting. If someone was able to explain to me that this really was going to make a difference, then I would be all for it, but I haven't heard that it's going to make a huge difference in a positive way for the residents or in a positive way for FORA or for the underlying jurisdictions. I just don't see the benefit in the delay. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other final comments? Yes. Councilmember
This might
Beach.
be a question for staff. One of the things now that I've been on the board for several months that I seem to remember is that the last time we discussed this, we had to wrestle with the fact that when we don't make regular increases, we build up into a shock possibility where we need to catch up all at once. And that's, to me, that's the other side of there's lots of other sides to every coin, but the one of the, nobody wants to, it would be great if we could live at low rents all the time, but then since at some point we need to catch up, my question is more about, are we now on track to have predictable, regular increases that are not, that people can budget for, that people can expect? And this question for staff might be, is there a way to smooth that curve? In other words, is this 2.9 or 4, whatever it is, for above or below what a really good smooth curve would be? And can we just make a policy choice to be on the smoothest, most gradual curve possible? I think that might be something we could reliably vote on instead of having to wrestle with this every time, of the sort of sadness of having to raise rents at the same time as the desire to avoid the shock later.
Your statement is accurate about the problem that you create when you defer increases, especially when you've just depleted your reserves in order to put brand new roofs on all the buildings and to complete capital programs that were approved by this board to sustain quality. The tenants have asked for additional improvements that have to do with double painting windows, that have to do with other improvements to roads and streets and parking, and we've been doing those on a consistent basis. City of Marina appropriately says this is also a revenue source for us. And in order for us to be able to do the things that we need to do to keep this project consistent with the current policy, and the board may want to consider whether it wants to continue the policy. But the current policy is to stay within the fair market rents being charged by other comparable rents in the region. That's number one. Number two, in terms of your smoothing out question, the board's policy some years ago was to follow the recommendation of the City of Marina. The City of Marina and FORA found that to be a difficult political problem over the early part of the last decade, and about 10 years ago adopted a policy that says we either raise the rents the lower of 3% or consumer price index, which is the method of smoothing that out so people can understand and expect what those adjustments and changes will be. In some years, even though the boards of Marina, the council, and the board of FORA had the option of raising the rent, there was a choice not to do that for other reasons. So, as we mentioned, 2011 there was no rent increase, even though there could have been a 1.7% increase. So, in terms of expectations, that's what we've done over time. And at this point, we have pretty much depleted capital resources and need to replenish those if we're going to continue to maintain the quality of the place and the healthy place that it is for people to live.
Can I then respond? Just
yeah, go ahead.
I think I might, if this is Robert's rules, I might propose an alternate motion, which is to go ahead and approve the staff's recommendation, but with the request that we agendize for later discussion, a policy look again at the 3% or the CPI. I'm not saying I dispute it at all, but my preference as a sort of public official has, I will always err on this side. I would rather not revisit debates like this on a case-by-case basis. I would rather find something that works for the community through good, in-depth discussion and that makes these sort of small management decisions not a matter of constant strife for us. So maybe we don't have the right policy in place, maybe we do, but I'd like to have that discussion. So my motion would be to have that discussion, and for today, though, to go ahead and accept the staff recommendation.
Does the maker of the motion, the original motion, accept the alternate motion?
I could accept that if the Residents Association and the management had a second meeting where they could have aired their grievances, because they feel very strongly that they have not had a chance to talk with management. Other than that, I would be very happy to go with that.
I don't understand I'm lost.
When the residents
You're saying your answer is no, right?
Yeah, when the
Okay, so
residents
that's simple.
of Preston Park call a representative in Monterey with their concerns, I feel that they are saying, we have some strong concerns here that the management has not met yet.
Okay, so the answer is no, yes. Go ahead,
What
Mayor
she has
Rubio.
proposed a substitute motion, not
Right.
an amendment to a motion.
Okay, gotcha.
So if there's a second to the motion,
Okay.
then we have to vote on the substitute motion. And if it passes, then the first motion is null and void.
Okay, we have a substitute motion by Councilmember Beach and a second by Councilmember Amadeo. So that takes precedent right now. We'll go through a roll call vote with the substitute motion first. And first of all, let's discussion on the substitute motion.
Just because I'm not at all in opposition to Nancy's concern, and I want to make, I was wondering if there was an opportunity today, during this meeting, we already went into it a little bit, but are the folks here today that could have their questions answered? Is that something that we could take care of now?
I believe you're going to have a large group of people and discussions in that regard. I don't see a large group of people here. You might have one or so.
There's another.
Yes, Councilmember Lucius.
Thank you. Just to speak to the substitute motion, and particularly the idea of kind of delaying these things, and then there's a shock later when the rent has to be increased substantially, and I certainly wouldn't want to create that situation. But also looking at the history, I understand there was not an increase in 2011. 2012 was delayed, which meant there were actually 2 increases in 2013, and now it hasn't even been a full year, and we're talking about an increase again. So I think those 3 increases together create a shock for the residents, and I feel this tension between the work that needs to be done and the revenue that's required to get that work done. So I understand that tension and trying to reconcile that problem and this potential delay. But I feel very sensitive to this, and I don't ever want to act like $40 a month isn't a big deal, because it is a big deal for people who live paycheck to paycheck. And we're talking about, it was $40 last February, and then it was another $40 last September, and now it's another $40. So it's not a $40 increase. It's really a $120 or $150 increase over the last year. So that's why I'm hesitant to approve this today, particularly if the residents haven't had much of a voice. But I also, like I said, I also appreciate the need to generate revenue and to get the work done. Thank you.
Any other discussion by board members? Yes, Mayor Pro Tem Oldsby.
On the substitute, I know it's a couple of members that are new to the board, but we have been dealing with this for a few years now, and the residents have came and told us what their concerns were. And a few years ago, their concerns were maintenance of these units. And that's why we don't have any money in the accounts, because we have updated the roofs, we have done some heaters, we have done some doors, we have done other maintenance, 2-pane windows and other requirements, and I spoke heavily on that. But just to say, well, they haven't met with the group, so we need to hold off on raising the rent is, I think, a little bit much. And I agree with you, over a year and a half, $100 and something odd dollars is a bit much. But it goes back to the policy of either we're going to have this discussion every year or we're going to level it out, and we agreed to level it out with the CPI. And as you know, the CPI is every year, so either we're going to adopt it or not. I won't get into exactly what it's $49 or $21. It's just, are we going to keep up with what we need to bring in as revenue to keep the buildings up so we don't get the complaints that the buildings are not being ran in an efficient manner and maintenance is not being done. So I'm really trying to find out where the board is at with the comments, because we need the money to keep the buildings running, and it takes rent increase to keep the money coming in. So.
Yes, Mayor Rubio.
Yeah, it's a tough issue. We've been dealing with it for a long time, and we all want to do the compassionate thing. We also are here to take care of the fiduciary responsibility of this board to maintain those apartments and you know, those living quarters. I have experience with you know, 300 units in Salinas, and the bubble of keeping them up to snuff or not is very quick. I mean, they start sliding, then it's really hard to bring it back. That deferred maintenance becomes very, very difficult. And I'm going to support the board member from Marina on this subject, because they've been dealing with this issue for a long time. They have to make sure that the apartments are livable, that they're clean, and that they're healthy for people to live in. And there has to be the fiduciary responsibility of having an adequate reserve, and a maintenance reserve, and operations reserve, and those things are depleted. And your compassion can go so far as to where it starts eroding the ability to house these folks in those buildings. So I support the board member from Marina.
Okay. Yes.
Sorry,
Councilmember Amadeo.
my
please.
last comment.
Okay.
I have been a landlord of just one home, and I understand how compassion can sometimes cloud your judgment. We opted to be compassionate. We rented for below market, then we rented for Section 8. As a result, we did not have enough income coming in to keep the property at its optimum level. We ended up, after 25 years, of having to evict our tenant that we'd been very kind to, not because the tenant had done anything wrong, but because the house was no longer in livable condition. And it cost us far more to turn it into livable condition. We now had an empty building. We now had huge expenses, far greater than if it had been maintained appropriately. And we ended up, because of that mistake, costing ourselves far more money than if we'd just done it as a matter of an annual rent increase in order to maintain the property. It was a huge mistake, and I'm afraid that this is a mistake where compassion can get in the way of good judgment, and we will end up with a property out there that nobody wants to live in, that is uninhabitable, that we create a slum instead of a beautiful place to live. I don't want to be a slumlord.
Okay, we have a motion. We have a substitute motion before the board to approve the fiscal year 2014-15 Preston Park Housing operating capital budgets with a 2.4% rent increase to be followed in very short time before the board to take a look at smoothing out any potential increases in the future, coming up with some sort of a procedure by which to avoid these spikes in the uncertainty with regard to management and with regard to the tenants. Any further discussion? Saying none, let's have a roll call vote, please.
Mayor Pro Tem Beach?
Yes.
Chair Edelin?
Aye.
Mayor Gunter? Councilmember Lucius. Councilmember Amadeo.
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Oglesby.
Yes.
Mayor Pendergrass. Supervisor Potter. Mayor Rubio. Councilmember Selfridge.
No.
The motion receives majority support. Will return for a second vote.
Yeah, we'll bring it back next month as our practice. This is 2 wins for Marina in a row. Councilmember Amadeo, we may have to lock the door and not let her leave. Very good. We're getting some real cooperation between all of us right now.
Chair Edlin, may
Yes.
I ask a question? Could
Sure.
we ask for a meeting between the FORA staff and the Residents Association and the management
We have
before our
manag-
next meeting? Can we ask for that?
Is that possible? Is the management? Yeah. Would that be possible?
We can certainly try and set something up with the Tenants Association to take place between sometime now and your next meeting, which would be August 10th.
Right. If you have any difficulties, get with our executive officer and let us know what the difficulties are.
Sure.
Okay, we have to have open communication on both sides.
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, next on the agenda, we're on a roll here. Quarterly Environmental Services Cooperative Agreement, better known as ESCA update. Michael, take it away.
Yes, Chair Edel and members of the board, this is an information item, and I only have one item to highlight because the board report itself is fairly clear. It does give you an update on where the budgets are for the ESCA project. It does let you know what the status is for the field work, which is now complete with respect to all known contaminants in the field. We are in the middle of the paperwork processing, and the highlight I would give is that we are still in the dispute resolution process between the United States Army, U.S. EPA, and DTSC, and we have requested participation in that process. The parties to the dispute resolution are considering that. We have not yet heard back from EPA as to whether or not we get to weigh in. This was a similar problem that this board may recall. Mayor Pendergrass and Supervisor Potter may recall that we had this problem in 1999 where the Army entered an agreement, but the FORA board was not involved in the discussion about that agreement that delayed our recovery program, and so we're anxious to participate in this. Chair, that's all I have on the ESCA.
Any questions by board members? Saying none, out to the public. Any questions by members of the public? Saying none, back to the board. This is information only, so we'll deem the report received. Next, we have a Marina Coast Water District update presentation on augmentation and policy issues. Michael will introduce. Steve, go ahead and you. Okay, Brian, you're third down the lane, and take it away.
All right, thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. So Marina Coast Water District, we met with the admin committee and the Water Wastewater Oversight Committee a couple weeks ago, and we're making good progress. The Marina Coast Water District did implement its budget this month with the understanding that we are going to be addressing both policy issues that we've identified, and if we go to the second slide, we can take a look at those. So staff from both agencies have broken down these 8 items that we are looking at, and we will be addressing these in the upcoming months, and we'll be getting answers back to the FORA board and the Marina Coast board as we deal with these at the staff level. So the first one is representation. That seems to be a really big issue that we're trying to address, and a subset of that is at the last meeting I was before you, somebody mentioned the idea of a ratepayer advocacy committee or advisory committee. We are looking to bring that to my board, Marina Coast Water District Board, in the upcoming months, hopefully August, if I can get that information in time together so we can get that in front of our board and they can start discussing that. We have the FORA voluntary contribution versus MCWD capacity charge. I believe most of that is behind us. There may be some straggling questions on that issue, so hopefully we can address those when they come up, but I think that issue is actually resolved for the most part. The use of reserves versus operational shortfall, I think that is really a historical, getting everybody up to speed on what was done in the past type of issue regarding policy, so we're going to be bringing some historical context into that discussion. Facility agreement language for 3 months budget review period. Both agency staff agree that the facility agreement may need to be refreshed. We want to take a look at that and see if we can improve the language to better clarify the relationship between the two agencies. So we're going to be talking about that through the next coming months. A regional project fund recovery. At some point in time, we're going to hopefully stand in front of you and say we have recovered the funds that we expended on the regional project. At some point in time, maybe it won't be dollar for dollar, but we'll be able to say that we've successfully put that behind us, and now we're going to move forward. The 218 process. There were a number of questions on the 218 process that Marina Coast Water District went through. We are continuing to gather information and questions on that process from your staff, so we are going to be addressing that at some point in the near future as well. And then finally, today is augmentation water. I got basically 3 slides behind this one that deal with augmentation water. There's a real high-level overview of where we are. Last time I was in front of you, I agreed that I'm going to start meeting with each individual agency, so Representative FORA, and we can kind of get a better picture of what the augmentation program is going to look like going forward. This is probably everybody's best understanding of what the augmentation program looks like, or did look like a couple of years ago, which is the Regional Urban Water Augmentation Program. This is projecting forward to 2030. It was generally agreed by everybody that we needed roughly 9,000 acre-feet. We have 6,600 acre-feet of groundwater, 1,200 acre-feet of desalinated water, and 1,200 acre-feet of recycled water. And that's what the water portfolio would look like in 2030 if we did implement that. Next slide, please. So, this is a more diversified water portfolio for 2030 that actually gives us a little more flexibility in regards to providing water. And I think this is really, this or a modification of this is where we need to go. And I'm going to talk to individual agencies at the staff level, present at the board level, so see if we can get some traction behind this. Because I believe this is actually better for the community. It will provide rate stabilization to some degree in terms of water rates. It will provide quicker ability to deliver augmentation water. And talk about conservation. I think conservation is really low-hanging fruit. And go back to my statement last time, which is a gallon saved is a gallon earned. If we can implement conservation, we can rapidly start a positive augmentation program. Surface water, we're still discussing Water Resource Agency. We think we can implement that to some degree. Recycled water, we're talking with PCA in terms of implementing a recycled water program. And then desalination still plays a part. We're going to have to build a desalination unit unless somebody else comes up with something better, fog collectors or something. So that also plays a part as well. So it's just a matter of when we implement each component of the program and the cost associated with that program and a payment schedule for that program. We're in the process of developing that, which is part of reaching out to your agencies and making sure we understand what your plans are for the future so that we can have the water ready, and both in paper, have the paper water ready for the water studies, and also the drops of water ready for your residents when they want and need that water. So the last slide, this is, as best as I can tell, the current situation on the Ord community. And I've modified it, and it's going to continue to be modified as I get a better understanding. We have basically the blue bars represent water that is being used or was used in 2013. The green bars represent obligated water. And by obligated, I mean that's water that the individual agencies have provided to subsets of their agencies. So the City of Marina, City of Seaside have developments that have planned. That green bar represents water that those developments could use or will use. The brown red bars represent water that has not been obligated. You can see that those bars, there's not many of them, and they're not that big. So this is an important situation that everybody's facing in terms of the question about when's the water, augmentation water, going to be available. Because we have to provide assurances that the water is going to be available so the agencies can develop, and then we have to provide that water when the agencies do develop their subset projects. So a couple of footnotes on this one that are probably a little difficult to read. I want to make sure that that gets highlighted. The Army is the far left bar. That's the one that's primarily blue and green on the very far left, the very first bar. And it was pointed out to me, and I learned through the process of the admin committee, that the Army doesn't really have an allocation. They actually retained that right to that water in contract. So I want to make sure that everybody understands that I'm only using the term allocation to include them in the full picture. But they actually have contractual rights. They did not give that water to FORA for allocation outward, but I still want to include them in the full picture. And then the second footnote is that the City of Seaside contract with Marina Coast Water District they are using water for Bayonet and Black Horse right now. So that blue bar, which is the second bar over, they have a high blue bar right now. That's going to drop in about 2.5 years when that contract expires. So with that, I will turn it back over to the chair, and I'm open for any questions or comments.
Thank you, Mr. Lee. Very, very informative. Thanks for all your work. You've really added some great momentum going forward on the cooperation between our two agencies. Any questions by members of the board? Yes. Councilmember Beach.
Sorry, I always have a math type question. I'm trying to understand the graph just a little bit better. I think this is an easy one for you. The green, let's just take the Army for a second. The green is also thought to run behind the blue. So there's almost 1,600 acre-feet per year, of which the blue part is being used. It's not the green stacked on top of the blue.
Correct. The
Okay.
green does run behind the blue.
Is that also true of the brown, or is the brown, I assume the brown is stacked
Brown
on
is stacked
top?
on top.
Exactly. So the brown is stacked, the green is behind. That's one thing. The other question was, and this, I think I'm having a deja vu moment. I don't know. I even remember that Ian asked about this last time. Tell us more about the Army, because what are they going to use that for? The green behind and on top of the blue, and why can't everybody else use it?
I do not have a really strong understanding of what the Army is proposing. I have not met with the Army yet. We do have meetings scheduled with the Army, so it would be better to maybe defer that question to a later date unless a representative from the Army is willing to answer that today. We're going to find out. That's one of the questions. And that not only applies to the Army, but every single agency up there on that slide.
Yes, President Ochoa.
Just to follow up on Councilwoman's question, isn't I mean, that's what runs behind the blue is the allocation figures, right? But not the green bar. I mean, unless you use software I'm not aware of, that's a stacked bar, right?
Okay, so we're dealing with technical issues of how I got this slide prepared versus what the slide really means. I could say that green plus blue is obligated. If we want to get real technical in that regard. Green plus blue is actually the obligated water.
And what does the allocation column on the figures on the table mean?
That is basically, as I understand it, and again, this is open to correction, this is one man's view, that is what the allocations are for each subset agency of the Fort Ord Reuse Authority.
And how does that amount relate to the obligated plus used?
I have another slide that I am working on that will provide better clarity towards that, which shows obligated versus allocated versus where we are in that situation. So basically we have 6,000 roughly acre feet of allocation water, 6,251, and that it does not track very well with what we're currently using right now. We have about 4,000 acre feet of groundwater that we are not using right now. And that's a big question that I would like to get answered. What are we going to do with that as a whole?
Okay, Mayor Rubio.
Thank you, Brian, for the update. Can you go back to the previous slide? My question is around the surface number and the conservation number, and then I'll have some comments. What exactly is surface water? Are we talking about runoff? Are we talking about stormwater runoff? Or what is that?
For my discussion right now, I consider surface water to be a part of the 11043 permit that the Water Resource Agency is discussing.
Okay, got it. And then as in terms of conservation, that 900, isn't that kind of like a double count? Because if it's coming up, you're conserving the groundwater that you have today, isn't it just not pulled out, it's still in the ground?
That is really something that I'm trying to get more up to speed on regarding conservation. I know that other agencies, my experience is with the San Diego County Water Resource Agency. They have conservation built into their portfolio, and their conservation efforts, I think, actually represent closer to 15% of their future portfolio. So how they are doing that is something I'm trying to ramp up to speed on. But we as a whole, the FORA board and the MCWD, I think at one point attributed a third of an acre foot of use to allocation costs. So if we can shrink that usage, we should be able to apply that benefit to future allocation. So we may not actually get to 9,000 acre feet per year of usage, but it would be the equivalent of where we are now of 9,000 acre feet. So your comment about double dipping, I think is not altogether that far off, because I'm not talking 9,000 acre feet of physical water, I'm talking 9,000 acre feet of allocation.
Right, it's, yeah, because it's not new water.
Exactly.
Right. Okay, so then my comments are, go back to the next slide. Number 5. Number 5.
Back to the future.
Yeah, you know, I remember you had made some comments in a previous meeting about, you know, swapping water between jurisdictions to meet the immediate needs of jurisdictions, so that it seemed like we didn't need an immediate project. But it's my sense that the Army or CSUMB or whoever has more water they're not using probably is not going to want to trade away their water unless there's the reality of a project that will supplement their water when they need it.
Yes.
Because around here it takes, I don't know, a decade, maybe a dozen years to get a
You're
water
being
project going.
conservative, I think, in that regard.
So, you know, that would be an important thing for us to be able to understand that there is a project. What you know, I mean, the process has started of describing the project and the EIR and so on. And also, that would really help with your annexation process. I don't know that any jurisdiction would want to be annexed unless they were assured that they would be able to be served.
Mm-hmm.
So those are just comments for you to think about as you flesh this whole thing out.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions by board members? Mr. Moore.
So just a couple of supplementary comments. The 10% on conservation could be fairly important going forward. And Mr. Lee has articulated pretty clearly about that, but I want to reemphasize the fact that 9,000 acre feet of total future demand is a number that was put into a 1998 base reuse plan. That was a few years ago. There's nothing that says it's absolutely impossible to get the same level of build-out development on the former Fort Ord and be stuck with having to deliver 9,000 acre feet of water. And this board, and in fact the urban design guidelines process that you're going through, would be an opportunity to make some serious inroads to developing that 10% less demand, which is essentially what that conservation would do. Here's a wild and crazy idea. I've been to a little city called El Paso, Texas, and people live there, and they seem to be perfectly happy in El Paso, Texas, but walk around most of the neighborhoods in El Paso, Texas, and there's something you won't see, and that's lawns irrigated by spray irrigation. You could, wild and crazy idea, under urban design guidelines, say we're not going to allow spray irrigation or lawns. We're going to require artificial turf or whatever. I mean, it's just one example of things that this board could do going forward to try and help achieve that 10%. And I'll just comment because I think this board is going to have to wrestle with this big elephant hiding in one corner of the room, and that is with any of the more expensive projects, and the conservation piece might be pretty inexpensive, but with things like desalination and reclaimed water, there's significant capital expenses associated with those and significant future going forward operating costs associated with those. So I'll just point out the big elephant that somebody's going to have to wrestle with is who actually will pay those costs going forward. So I look forward to you all solving that problem.
Together with you, yes. Any other questions? Yes, Mayor Pro Tem Zolberg.
Just comments. And that's one of the things I'm afraid of. We're going to try to use the design guidelines to conserve water. We're all about conserving water, but my front lawn is brown, okay? And it's you know, if each one of these individual board members want to go home and go to their jurisdictions and tell their representatives, hey, stop using water, well, then fine. Then come back to the people that live on Fort Ord and tell them they cannot have green lawns. You know, so we're talking about providing water, and Marina Coast's obligation is to provide the water. Maybe not at the 9,000 acre feet level because we don't have that much development, but it seems to me we're putting conservation in before we're talking about building a project. If we're going to stay focused, let's stay focused on a project. And the people that's going to have to pay for it is the people that's going to use the water. But we're not going to have any development if we don't have any water, we don't have any projects. So we need to just try to solve this problem and quit trying to talk about not having water, who's going to pay for it. Why don't we just come up with a plan, and then we'll start from there. But I don't know if people move to the peninsula or already live on the peninsula and they want to live in an area that reminds them of Arizona, right? So that's for me. And everybody else on the board, they can speak for their own selves. But it seems like we keep going around in a circle and a circle and a circle about this water thing. We need to provide water. We need to provide water. So I was a little concerned with the 10% conservation because I don't know where it came from. And you just said you're not sure where it came from, but it's less than the 15% that you said other places use. So, you know, one day I'm looking for someone to say, well, why don't we have 15% conservation? You know, so just comments to the board.
Right. Other comments? Yes, Councilmember Amadeo.
I actually appreciate Tom Moore's comments as he's talking about conservation. He's talking about new development and having the plan already in place for how conservation will take place under new development. He mentioned not having spray irrigation, which is a huge water drain. I tried when I was on the Planning Commission many years ago to get a developer to put in cisterns or put in gray water systems for each one of the dwelling units that he was planning. All he could think about was the cost, not the cost benefit. So I think that this board has a huge opportunity to start looking at cost benefit in how developments move forward so that we can do the kind of development that Ian Oglesby is talking about. We want that build out, we want that revenue, and they don't have to be separated over water. They can work hand in hand together.
Any other board member questions, comments? Seeing none, let's go out to the public. Any questions by members of the public?
Levon Stone again, Fort Ord Environmental Justice Network. We know who's going to pay for everything. We still have not put our focus where it should be. We're talking about water, building, people coming into the community, but we're not talking about how to help our community that has been that are being replaced by other people who have been caught up in this federal bureaucracy that had nothing to do with them. I will keep on saying that. And this process called for legislation and laws that are supposed to put in place to help the community that was being messed up here by a process that these people had nothing to do with. This is a public agency, FORA is, just like all the rest of the public agencies. So why is it that we get to talk, you get to make the decisions, and we get to suffer continually, hoping that this economic projects that you're talking about will create viable jobs for the community? They're creating good jobs for some people. If you were in the shoes of these people, you would not be sitting there saying, this is the best way to do it. We have people living in housing, the managers. We have people living in places that don't even have to pay rent. We have professors that don't have to pay rent. Why don't we, make it even up the process? The water, of course, the water rates haven't gone down. None of the utility rates have gone down. They've gone up. And we keep talking about putting the pressure on ratepayers and the people who have to have water and everything else to live, to exist. This is not a fair process. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Any other public comment with regard to this item? Saying none, public comment period's closed. Back to the board. Any final comments by board members? Yes, Mayor Rubio.
Yes, I'd like to thank Brian for his presentation again and for responding to the comments I made about conservation in terms of, the 4 to 3 count that we use for dwelling units in an acre foot. I think that will make a significant difference in the allocations, and I look forward to the plan that you can present to make that happen. Thank you.
Any other comments? Okay, this is an information item only, so we'll deem it received. U.S. Army rep will be able to leave at the end of the day, but he'll have to leave his water behind for us to share. Okay, next we have Regional Urban Design Guidelines. Mr. Josh Metz, he'll take us through that. Thank you.
Thank you, members of the board. Nice segue there, Tom, for our Urban Design Guideline project. But today we're going to just do a brief history about the origins of the Regional Urban Design Guidelines, where they come from, talk about what the task force that you all appointed has been up to, and come with a recommendation, and then talk about next steps. So the Urban Design Guidelines stem directly from the reuse plan. They're called for on page 61. If anybody wants to review, it's there. 2005, this board approved the Highway 1 Design Guidelines, and that was the first step in the process of development of these guidelines. The 2012 reassessment report identified the remaining components of the guidelines as yet to be completed. And in the 2013 colloquium, the value of these guidelines was highlighted. And we have all the videos from the colloquium. You might check out Peter Katz and Charles Bowl for some really good insights into the value of urban design guidelines around the country. The 2014 work plan that you all approved also includes moving ahead with this process, and as well, the 14-15 budget includes funds to support this work. So the task force was created and had 8 meetings in 3 months. During that time, we developed a request for qualifications and then a much more detailed request for proposals, and that came by way of multiple rounds of revision and interaction with the task force and the staff. We held interviews. We have videos for all the interviews are also available on the FORA website if anyone wants to review that. We evaluated the different applicants, and the task force came with a unanimous recommendation. So after looking at all the qualifications and doing the interviews, the recommendation is to go forward with the Dover Cole and Partners team, which includes Alta Planning and Design, Strategic Economics, and Helix Environmental. They also include key advisors Jeff Speck, Peter Katz, Bill Leonards, and Castle and Cook Developments. So that's the recommendation. The next steps would be, assuming this board wants to make approve the task force's recommendation, then the staff would go ahead and negotiate a scope and contract, and we would interact with the task force again in final details on the scope. And ideally, we could come back to you with a contract to approve for the August meeting and begin work on this project with some kickoff workshops in September. So that's the report.
Yeah, Sheriff, I'd like to add a couple things. First, Josh Metz has done an extraordinary job in making sure to provide the appropriate staffing that's required for the urban design guidelines process and to the staff. The committee did extraordinary work in their review. They were very timely in getting things back to Josh when he sent them out. Jane Haynes, as a member of the public, regularly attended and made sure that we did things the way we should. And Bob Schaefer stuck around to make sure to hold her hand and make sure it worked well. But I wanted to particularly thank folks like John Dunn and Dan Dawson. In particular, Lane Long came in at the end and provided some support. Elizabeth Carricker, Anya Spear, and Carl Holm all spent lots of extra hours reviewing scopes of work, reviewing requests for proposals, requests for qualifications, and the process turned out, I think, very efficiently in the end. One of our proposers didn't actually submit one of the third in the final, but the two that did were at extraordinarily high quality. So I thanked all those people, but in particular, board member Victoria Beach, Vice Mayor from Carmel, really provided some really important points of view with respect to the design guideline process because of her skill in the architectural field, but in particular, her perception of the selection process, I thought, was particularly useful. And Chair, I just wanted to add those. I think we would ask if the board would concur with the recommendation of the task force.
Any questions by members of the board?
This is not a question. This is I wanted like to. I think I said a little bit about this last time we met, but I just have to take an opportunity to gush about the staff. The staff is already gushing about itself, but I think that it was truly what it used to. It says 8 meetings in 3 months. I mean, I felt like 80 meetings in 3 months. We were in constant contact over that time, and I think that the staff is really to be commended. They did a magnificent job of supporting the body in its decision making. It was the absolute best kind of meeting in the sense that everybody, in my opinion, had their minds melded together to solve the question of how we were going to determine the the best, we thought 3 at the time, best qualified group. And the staff had a very open, they were in reception mode in the sense that any document that went out was always sort of publicly available to be sort of speared and shot down and reorganized. And we had long lists, and I'm happy to report, not usually from me, of comments that were readily and happily incorporated. I thought the staff was very clever about getting to the types of RFQ and RFP that would tease out very tough distinctions to make between the parties. These are, as was already said, very highly qualified teams that all came forward. I was wondering how we were going to decide, but the cleverness of the way that these things were written really teased out. By the time we were at the interviews, we were really set up to get the right information back. So I just want to say that to me it was a very rewarding experience, and it sort of puts the fun back in FORA for me.
Thank you, Victoria. Very nice remarks, especially the gushing experience that you explained. Thank you. Yes, Ms. Hale.
Yes, thank you. Well, now that all the hard work's been done, TAMC promises to engage in this process a little bit more. I wanted to find out if you could post the proposal online, because sometimes that gives us a great idea of all the creativity. It's a little more interactive or explanatory than the scope.
The proposal and all of the proposals that we got from the 2 final groups are online.
They are online?
Yeah.
Okay, I'll dig a little deeper. And then I wanted to find out, in terms of the next steps, is the task force going to continue, or is this going to flow through the administrative committee? Okay, then I will commit to have some staff attend the task force meetings.
Task force will continue.
Okay, yeah.
We're going to work them to death.
Okay. And then I also just noted you have September kickoff workshops, and as soon as you have those dates, we probably should coordinate with you on that, since we are having some multimodal corridor workshops, and I don't want to overlap with you.
Okay. Thank you, Debbie. Other comments? Yes, Mr. Moore.
So since I've been kind of vocal in the past about urban design guidelines, I'd like to do something unusual and move approval of the staff recommendation.
Well, we still have to go through some discussion about the public first, but thank you for your preemptive strike there. We'll come back to you. Any other comments by board members? Oh, you shut everybody down. Out to the public. Any comments by members of the public? Comment period's closed. We're back to Mr. Moore. Yeah, you were prescient in that regard. We have a motion by Mr. Moore to accept the report and select Dover, Cole, and Partners as the design team. Do I have a second to that motion?
In partnership with Tom, I'll second that motion.
With partnership, exactly. Okay, we have a second by Mayor Pro Tem Oglesby. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Wow. Our cup runneth over today. Okay, next is the regional trails planning update with Mr. Metz. Josh, he's done a great job with the PRAC. He's sort of honchoing the Program Reassessment Advisory Committee. A lot of work's done there. We're looking at a broad overview of what needs to be done here in FORA to educate people to go to the right direction, so to speak. And Josh has been a real workhorse on that. Thank you for all your work. And take it away, please.
Yeah, for this one, I'm going to actually be over by the computer because we want to do some visualization. So I hope you'll bear with me. I'll be speaking from over in the corner here. And I'll probably mess with the PowerPoint a little bit too, but hopefully not too disruptively. So one of the components of the urban design guidelines and the reassessment has been a focus on trail issues and trail planning. And so what we want to do is put what the reuse plan says about trails into context here. And then to come up to speed, we've gone about talking with each of the jurisdictions and related entities to understand what they're doing in regards to trails. And then we'll talk just briefly about a note on some simple items to consider for trail economics and some coordination and recommendations. So this comes out of the reuse plan, volume 1, context and framework. It's the section 3.6, conservation, open space, and recreation concept. And some elements here that are highlighted are that the trails are to provide connections to non-motorized transportation alternatives to all neighborhoods, and that they're intended to use recreation and open space assets to make the former Fort Ord attractive to potential users by interconnecting and increasing access, and that adequate right-of-way should be reserved along planned transportation corridors to accommodate trails, and that this one's for Jane Haynes, the Fort Ord Trails system shall be considered as an integral part of a larger regional trail network and shall be linked to the regional bike pedestrian trails wherever possible. So these are some elements that are from the plan. And in the plan, they call out for the base 3 major trails and 4 minor trails. So a major trail has a regional function connecting non-motorized and foot traffic to areas outside the base. There's some design aspects to that, including a 12-foot minimum width of asphalt or concrete. And there's 3 trails, which I'll be able to show you on a map here in a minute. Then the minor trails also are less critical role, but they distribute and collect traffic to and from neighborhoods along lower volume routes. They have a 10-foot minimum width of asphalt and concrete, and there's 4 of those that are called out in the plan. So this is the map that is from the reuse plan, 3.6-3. And as with many maps that were developed at that time, they're kind of renderings, representations. And so we've tried to bring those up a bit in terms of their utility for us. And so we'll see if this works. So here is our area, and these 3 different colored lines are the 3 major trails that are called out in the plan as best we can represent them. So this one here, I'll get this little thing out of the way. This orange one here is the Inner Garrison Trail, and simply it's intended to connect the Fort Ord Dunes State Park with the Fort Ord National Monument, CSUMB, and then the East Garrison development. And so that's a core east-west route, And as you'll hear about, and it has been already mentioned, there are some, call them grassroots efforts that are related to this route that sort of offer a different or a nuanced route rather than directly on the roadway as this is represented here. The second one is the Fort Ord Dunes State Beach route, and this one actually already exists. It's the Back Beach Road there. And then the third is the Salinas Valley to Seaside route, which basically in the reuse plan comes along Blanco Road. So this is perhaps related to the TAMC history that was presented earlier. Comes in along Reservation, Imgen, through CSU, and then makes its way over to here to Delray Oaks. Let's see which one I want to turn that one off. Yeah. So, and then there's two alternate routes. One comes down General Jim Moore, and the other along Coe Road into Seaside. So we can also then look at the minor trails that are called out, and just for the moment, I'll walk you through those. There's a Monterey Road Trail, which basically would help connect parts of Seaside to the main, Giggling and CSUMB area up past the golf course. There's a main gate component here that would basically link these areas. And there's a little spur. What do I got? I got a few little items in here. There's a spur that would connect you to the Dunes State Park, and there's another one that takes you up to Second Street. Sorry, 2nd Avenue. The third one is the Crescent Avenue that runs over here into Marina and would connect these neighborhoods. And then there's a fourth one that runs along Reservation. So as you can see, and as is indicated in the reuse plan, a lot of these trails follow existing right-of-ways, which is convenient. But it also calls out the importance of talking about trail definitions. And so in doing this background work, we encountered the complexities involved in using the word trail and having everybody be on the same page in terms of understanding what you're talking about. So we came up with our working definition, and this is by no means the final word, but we wanted to be as inclusive as possible. So we talk about passageways or designated routes for pedestrian, bicycle, equestrian, and or other non-vehicular uses that include paved, unpaved, urban, and rural routes. And one of our discussions, it was called out that you want to identify these facilities require maintenance and some form of liability coverage in the sense of some entity has to be responsible for them. So that was kind of our working definition, and going out and talking to each of these entities and to understand what they have done to develop their trail plan. So we'll start with Marina. They have a very well-developed Marina pedestrian and bicycle master plan, which talks about circulation on the surface streets and some off-road trails. So you're talking about recreation and transportation uses. It was approved by the City Council in 2010. It amends their general plan, which had a FORA consistency in 2010. And if you get into the depth of this project, or their plan, it includes routes through entitled Fort Ord projects. So it's something to draw on in terms of bringing together the more detailed view of what is actually planned for the base, and it also includes design guidelines. So that's a really valuable piece because it talks about what some of the navigation signage would be like and road crossings and things like that. Seaside also has a bicycle route component of their general plan, which had a consistency determination in '04. There is an update process underway, as we all know, and so there, in our work with the staff there, they've expressed real interest in ensuring that whatever updates are made to this aspect of their plan would optimize the connections to trails on the former Fort Ord. Monterey County is also undertaking a big trail network and habitat management planning effort right now. They've enlisted Bellinger Foster Steinmetz, which is not a relative of mine, but could be, I guess, in another world. But we are landscape architects, and so they are a landscape architecture firm that is working on the lands that they will assume management of in short order. And so, again, the need to at least ensure the trail ends and beginnings connect has been highlighted through this effort, and will continue to be part of the discussion. City of Monterey has done great work with their Monterey on the Move program. They've received significant grant funds to develop multimodal transportation plans related to circulation, recreation. They got a great website, and I think it can serve as a model for the rest of the region as something to work towards and with. Our friends at Delray Oaks have also expressed real interest in connecting with all the plans on the base, and particularly through the Frog Pond parcels down towards Highway 68. So they're on board with all our collaboration and planning efforts. BLM is probably has the largest, what we'll call classically referred to as a trail network. They have 40 miles of administrative roads that primarily serve fire break and vegetation management functions. These can accommodate larger vehicles, and they have about 50 miles of recreational trails with multiple uses and some segregated uses to provide optimal experiences for bikers or hikers or what have you. So their kind of focus at the time is on signage, trailhead quality, and maintenance. And Eric Morgan and his group are actively involved in this discussion and interested to participate. I did get a word that I have not yet connected with the Army Planning Department, which I will be doing shortly after this to get their input on all these related matters. So the state park at the Dunes has a tentative trail route, which will, the route is subject to change pending habitat issues and the completion of the HCP, but this map sort of indicates that they will have a route that pretty much follows the existing bike route along towards the Highway 1, and then one farther up towards the heads of the dunes for hikers. CSUMB likewise has a real focus on pedestrian and bicycle transportation, as was mentioned earlier today. There is a preliminary trail concept under development, and they're really interested in connecting students to the Dunes State Park, the East Campus Housing, the National Monument, which I think fits very well with the need for that inter-garrison trail. I wanted to call this out because in doing my research, I thought this was perhaps some of the best rendering of regional bikeways. This was done by the CSU planning staff, and basically it informs their students the best way to navigate Marina through CSUMB and down to Seaside. So I think great resource for the region. Also, not to be forgotten, TAMC has done some great work with their 2011 Bike and Pedestrian Master Plan. Noted that they've also been working with the planning design team that's part of our Regional Urban Design Guidelines group, so that should be a nice transition to make with them. And in addition, their work on the Monterey Bay Sanctuary Scenic Trail Network was quite significant. This master plan was completed in 2008, and really, I think, the trail is just a huge regional asset, one that we can build off of for enhancing the value of any trail network on Fort Ord. Which brings us to this effort, which can be referred to as FORA TAG, and this is what we're calling a grassroots effort. It's led by Fred Watson and Scott Waltz, CSUMB professors, in collaboration with Gail Morton, who's not here today, unfortunately, because she'd be cheerleading pretty hard for this one, I'm sure. This is a concept that they are hoping sees some daylight, which is a loop trail that would kind of pretty much follow the path of the inner garrison route, but then also extend upwards past the Marina Airport and then back eventually to the coastal trail. So you'll be hearing more about this, and they're kind of taking steps to engage with various folks that would have say on this process. And as well, we're doing our part to work with them as much as we can. And finally, last but not least, Victoria coordinated with a beginning focus on Carmel and Peninsula, but a broader focus from Carmel north to Salinas, an effort to organize trail information for planning purposes, but also with an idea to inform tourism here. And so that effort has resulted in the compilation of existing trail information and sort of getting it to a level where it can then have a second life and potentially inform the planning efforts that would follow either with us or other county agency that would take on that big effort. So this slide just shows you some of the meetings that we've had and highlights some recommendations, which is that FORA continue to serve as a regional hub for trail planning for the time being, recognizing FORA has a limited lifespan ahead. There has already been a conversation about sort of stewarding the process for now while the momentum is here, but then eventually passing it off to whichever more appropriate organization there would be. And that incorporating the trail planning into the RUDG process is a natural fit and sort of is a good timing thing. So I did have I know on the beginning I had a little slide in here was going to talk about trail economics, but I realized that we edited that out purposefully because we think that's a more appropriate topic to follow some of the in-depth planning that will happen in the near future. So just know that there's costs and benefits associated with trail development. So I'll end with that. Any comments or questions?
Josh, thank you very much. Excellent work. A lot of hard work done by yourself and the Program Reassessment Advisory Committee. As you can see, there's a lot of good work done in isolation to some extent by all land use jurisdictions and other organizations. And the PRAC is sort of taking the lead and trying to look at an overall view, tying everybody together. So we foresee that our organization will start it and eventually we'll turn it over to either AMBAG, Monterey County, or TAMC, which are more regionally oriented, and they'll be around past 2020. At least we hope the other organizations will be around past 2020. Any questions by members of the board? Yes, Mayor Rubio.
Yeah, thank you for a very complete presentation. It was very nice. The only question I have is there seems to be a gap. The East Garrison, the East Side Parkway, seems like a very good opportunity for another trail that would connect General Jim Moore to the inner Garrison and maybe Eucalyptus to the East Side Parkway, and they're not shown there. Is there a reason for that?
Yeah, well, so what I've done here is just take what's written in the plan and translate it into the Google Earth rendering, and the main trail that would probably fit there would be the Salinas Valley to Seaside Trail, and the way it's rendered in the plan doesn't include that route, but I think the opportunity would be that discussion in forthcoming planning exercises to say, hey, here's a need, and I think it, probably relates to some of these connectivity of transportation route issues that were raised earlier. It's not a bad suggestion.
And a follow-up to that is that that would provide some opportunity for trailheads into the BLM and National Monument.
Yeah, indeed, and I think that question has also been part of our conversations at the PRAC, where we've been working with Caltrans to try to get some signage on the highways to point to the National Monument and the State Park, and identifying the formal trailhead access points remains something to be done, so that would be useful.
Thank you.
Councilmember Amadeo.
Thank you. I have a question, and it's related to Councilmember Morton's work that she's done on this inverted C or something.
Right.
At any rate, the Greenway. And I noted that part of it goes through land north of the Marina Airport that I believe is an economic development parcel area. It also goes through Armstrong Ranch, which the city doesn't own. That's a different issue
Indeed.
altogether. But if trails are going through economic development parcels, and therefore might have an impact on how those parcels can be used, would FORA, as the oversight agency, then have to look at, if we're not able to reach economic development in this parcel, what parcel are you substituting for economic development? In other words, would this change the current base reuse plan? Those things that were designated one way now become designated another, and there has to be some sort of a trade-off? Or is it just dividing a parcel and economic development would still continue on that parcel? I just want a better understanding. I like the idea of the trail connections, just as I wanted better connection for our roadways. We do need better trail connection. I just want to understand how that will impact economic development parcels.
Yeah, so I know Michael will weigh in on this, but I just wanted to say with regard to that particular project, the one part that is consistent with existing direction from the reuse plan is the inner Garrison Trail from the State Park pretty much to East Garrison. And so in my conversations with them, I've been pretty much recommending, hey, stick with the part that's already called for in your short-term horizon, then maybe in your longer-term horizon there's many possible variations. And then with regard to the economic development parcel question, I'll defer that to Michael, but my only comment there would be the idea is that the trail development is intended to elevate the economic appeal and growth of the region rather than detract from it. So anything more than that you would add, Michael?
Well, two things. I think anytime you develop a trails program that crosses multiple jurisdictions and multiple property owners, you have a lot of issues that you're going to have to address before you even get to the economic development question. You have, in some cases, these trails go over sovereign entities, or I think CSUMB and University of California consider themselves that. They cross over lines that have to do with certain airport restrictions. They do deal with economic development parcels. Our program would allow for adjustments or modifications, but it would also have to, as you did that, you'd have to address the question about habitat conservation if you move the property around. So in terms of looking at it, how it complies with the base reuse plan and what the base reuse plan says, it's the scale of economic development that we look at versus the precise location. So if a jurisdiction comes up with a greenway through an economic development parcel but still complies with making that an economic development parcel, we would find it to be in compliance, likely, at least at the staff level.
And I will add to that just a comment that recently there's been in the news, Napa Valley, Visit Napa Valley has been, they just passed a motion within the county to develop a bike trail from the ferry terminal in Vallejo all the way up to Calistoga, which will cross multiple private lands. And so I would say that the complexities involved with developing the trail across multiple jurisdictions shouldn't be a barrier. Rather, they're doing this as an economic driver. And in fact, in the articles, they've commented about already their growth of tourism has grown almost, I think it was like 6% since the last time they did the report. And they were saying how much of that tourism came from Monterey County specifically. So where Monterey County tourism had dropped, theirs had grown to the same extent. So I think the bar has been set, and perhaps Monterey can, come back with an equally impressive bike trail plan.
Yeah, Director Bice.
Thanks. I agree that the trails can be a great economic driver, and it looks like most of the trails that you showed there seem to be consistent with what has already been analyzed in terms of development of the base. The concern with the FORTAG plan is that it does go through a lot of properties that the property owners haven't been consulted to discuss this, and UC would have questions about whether this makes sense through UC's land. I can't say that it doesn't yet, but it has to be evaluated. But there is a concern that I think Michael just touched on. We've been working for 17 years with U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service and California Department of Fish and Wildlife to get this habitat conservation plan finished. If there's a change to the plan at this time that they see reopens that discussion, I'd hate to think how much longer it's going to take for this to be completed. So I just insert a word of caution. Let's try to get that through that barricade first, get that permit in place, and then open up the discussion for some other trails that may really be of great benefit to FORA.
Excellent point. Mayor Rubio.
I'll just follow up on Ms. Amadeo's thought. Would this in any way affect any of those parcels in terms of their being able to pass a consistency determination based on a change of priority for a trail? I think that would probably be one of the primary concerns for a jurisdiction.
Is that a question?
Mm-hmm. Would it affect that?
Michael?
It could, but it really depends on what's proposed by the jurisdiction. So if it's a trail that is a part of an overall development of the parcel, and it's a greenway through a parcel that's a development parcel, that would be one thing. If it was a change that reduced the amount of development and changed its character, we've already seen where that is a substantial change to the base reuse plan. But it's all about substantial. It's all about following through on still meeting your obligations. City of Seaside moved certain activities from one location to another. And we found that to be consistent because you shifted the location. That may be what would be included in a parcel that might now become a green area, but development moves to another location.
Okay, any other questions by board members? Yes.
Just a comment. This could have been part of your presentation. I was out of the room, but at the beginning, somewhere in the packet, I believe we referred to an upcoming potential trails educational symposium that I'm very interested in seeing. I think this would be the sort of in-depth type of discussion we could have through that. I'd be very curious to see what, even my trails work with the city of Carmel, I've gotten glimpses of some expertise out there that's really fascinating about how other jurisdictions, Napa might be one of them, have tackled these things. In the colloquium we had in December, we saw some examples of interweaving of trails with development and intensification of development around trails. And we also, just to tie it all together, we have a speaker, I think possibly it sounds like coming in September, who is the fellow from the local jurisdiction in Orlando who had shepherded the Baldwin Park base reuse, the Orlando Naval Training Center, I think it was, through its completion, or at least through its launch, and then it was implemented, I think, quite well. That was an example that came up at the colloquium a lot, and I think one of the ways they used that example, they used it in multiple ways. One of the ways they used it is in the way that otherwise dead space became an amenity for recreation, et cetera. So, like, I think they talked about sort of like drainage ditches and things like that magically becoming ponds and water features, and all these properties that used to be undervalued became the overvalued properties because of their relationship to that. So it'll be interesting to see what that guy, we weren't bringing him here to talk about trails, but that, I seem to recall that project actually had that element to it also. We will be hearing from him, in the early fall about just successful base reuse, sort of from an inspirational and technical standpoint, so an implementation standpoint. But it all ties together, and we haven't really talked much about a trails symposium follow-up. Was that part of your?
Well, what kind of came down, I think, at the staff level was a recognition that we have this big effort, the regional urban design guidelines, moving forward, and this is sort of a natural fit into that. In fact, the trails is a part of the scope that we asked for. So rather than have two parallel efforts, we kind of made sense to fold it into that scope. And so there will certainly be some form of regional trail discussion, planning effort that hopefully everybody wants to participate in.
Victoria, thank you for volunteering on the upcoming, and we will work volunteers to death, here at FORA, right? Okay. Mayor Pro Tem Oglesby.
I thank the committee, and I thank for all their work they've been doing. I just want to caution the board. I think Graham made a good point about trying to get through the fish and wall game procedures before we move to something as large as trails. And then as a subcommittee trying to work through trails through different jurisdictions, I think it's a little bit more difficult. And then comparing this base reuse to other base reuse, I think this is the largest one in the world so far. So trying to compare the two, I think, is a little different. And I thought the first slide, or one or two first slides, said that the trails take priority, or it shall, or it's a must. And so when we start talking about that, and we start talking about what other people think should be the best route through jurisdictions, and if we're not going to include the properties of higher learning, we're not going to include the state beaches, we're not going to include the national monument, telling them which direction their trails should meet, I think it's going to be hard for this board to try to lay out trails through the city of Seaside. I won't speak for any other city, but we do have parcels that we're thinking that should be of economic value. And I understand what you said, that some other communities increase their tourism because of that. But if we lay out the trail and then all of a sudden we say we want to put some economic development there, then I agree with Nancy about how do we move that parcel around, or what takes precedent, the trailhead or some type of economic development. So, I agree with the committee and what they're trying to do, but it's not a vacuum.
Indeed.
You guys should get up to the boundaries of these jurisdictions, and you should go back to the staff and say, do you have anything coming up in that area, and work your way around it. Otherwise, you're just, to be honest with you, spinning your wheels. Because I think at the end of the day, it's for the jurisdictions to take care of and maintenance these trails. So we don't want to, what is it, unfunded, unfunded mandates. So thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other discussion, Mr. Moore?
So I'd just like to acknowledge Councilmember Oglesby's concerns and acknowledgement that this is a challenging process, and want to make sure that we fully understand that the picture that was just provided by Josh includes, let's say, 100-yard segments of trails in various places that are already in plans. They're in places that you couldn't really move them anywhere else. They make sense to be there. But his presentation also includes conceptual things that aren't in anybody's plan yet, are going to require considerable discussion as Councilmember Oglesby pointed out, across various jurisdictions and land use owners. And those folks' needs and concerns are going to have to be taken into account. But the whole point of this process is, in fact, to try and create some comprehensive end result that works for everyone's needs. There's also an interesting cost element to this, and I've had a very brief discussion with the chair of the Operations Research Department over at the Naval Postgraduate School, because it presents an interesting problem with respect to where you put various segments and the costs of each segment. And he's expressed some interest in seeing if they could find a operations research thesis student, because this struck him as a problem of optimization in terms of costs. So if we could find a student interested in taking that on, and obviously the Navy School has had some interest in the closure of the Fort Ord to begin with. So I will pursue that and see if possibly we can bring a student who could take a look at this in a way to try and minimize the costs of putting together something that works for various jurisdictions.
Thank you, Tom. Very, very helpful on that. Ms. Hale?
Just briefly, I think this is a great compendium of all the different trail plans, concepts that are out there. And I think that the comments so far have illustrated how getting from that concept even to a plan involves a lot of agreement and cooperation and such. And because it's a multi-corridor plan, it's even more complicated than what we've been talking about doing with the multimodal corridor, which has been pretty complex as it is. But that said, certainly lends itself towards the eventual development of a regional trail plan, and I don't know to what extent FORA has been talking about that. But, be very interested in coordinating with you on it, because we, at TAMC, we tend to focus on transportation as a way to get from one place to the other, and we focus on those funding resources. But trails can become a way to get from one place to another, and yet they can also be a recreational purpose, and so that opens up a whole new set of funding sources that we don't generally look at. And so we'd definitely be interested in seeing where you're thinking of going next on this, and perhaps working with you towards setting up a process for a regional trail plan, because there are funding sources that are available for that kind of an effort, recognizing that there's a lot of jurisdictions we're talking about here, and not just land use jurisdictions.
Thank you, Debbie. Any other board member comment? Saying none, let's go out to the public. Any comment from the public, please, on this item?
Ron Cheshire, good afternoon. I've been going to Napa since 1969, and I have a very good friend there. We meet every few months, and the last time we got together, we sat on his patio, and we hadn't really started into the wine celebration yet, so we were able to speak intelligently about things. And one of the things is that he lived there all his life. And I just want to rebut something that was said here in regards to if a trail plan was just passed, that didn't create a 6% economic benefit to the city of Napa. What has created an economic benefit to Napa is the fact that the wine industry, the leaders have come together. Their city is much more vibrant than it ever was. There's been a lot of economic development along the river in the downtown area where it was collapsing. It's growing. You used to go to Napa several years ago. You couldn't find a hotel room. That's changing. They're developing hotels. They're creating jobs. And they're doing what it takes to economically develop their area to where everyone that lives there has a chance to get a piece of the pie. And I congratulate Mr. Oglesby over there for his continuous reminding you that economic development is important, and it is very important here in regards to what takes place at Fort Ord. I'm not opposed to trails. In fact, I support trails. but trails are not going to be the only thing that brings us economic prosperity to this area. What's going to bring economic prosperity is a vast combination of things to create jobs for the people that live here, for the people that may live here, and a nice environment for all of them and the people that want to visit here. So thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Next speaker, please.
Hi, Jan Schreiner. I just want to say, as a resident of Marina, I'm very excited about this collaboration. And I want to mention that I have the good fortune to interact with a lot of young people through some of my hobbies, my family, my work. And one thing I've been noticing is bicycles are really getting to be popular in hotels. So I want to give a shout out to the hospitality industry that this could be a boon for our area. They've grown in popularity in places like Seattle, London, Tokyo. Young people right now are totally into the bikes. When you take a train to Oakland, you will see a phenomenal number of bicycle riders getting on, as well as you will see the availability of bikes in the stations, so you can get on a bike with a card. The bike festival in San Jose, fantastic. People actually decorate their bikes themselves, their dogs, and they ride in the street of San Jose, and then they come to booths. It's an event. Thousands of bikes. There are also bike parties. I have not been to one. Personally, I feel really lucky that I can sleep soundly through the night. But I was running with a young man that, in the language of today, is a beast. And he was kind of tired that day, and he said he'd been up most of the night in a bike party. I said, a bike party? Like, how many people come to a bike party? You know, because it's a growing thing. These young people, they're doing things that are clean and sober. And I don't mean, like scrubbing the walls. They're clean, like drug-free. I think it's so great. So he told me, yeah, I think there was about 5,000. I'm like, get out. He said, yeah, 5,000 cyclists. I said, how did you guys find out about this? Facebook, website? No. He's like, no, the social media is way beyond that. You got to get an app, and then you know when the party is and where to go. And they are at it all night long. So I don't know if it's hit CSUMB yet, but I think it's fabulous. The greenways, up in Santa Clara Valley, the Open Space Authority just recently completed their inventory. They believe they have $1.6 billion now in value of open space in the Santa Clara County. So they are also noticing, of course, the proximity to rec trails is improving the home values. So that's a fabulous thing for those developers to consider. You have a rec trail, you're going to have a better profit. And by evaluating that value, perhaps you can even increase the value strategically. Last time I talked to Dr. Watson about that, he said he has some students working on the open space valuation. He hasn't gotten very far with it, but they're still working on it. Have a mention of the temperature here is very moderate. In Colorado right now it's been like 95. Nobody's biking much. So keep that in mind for your tourism. You've got winters that are fierce back east. You've got summers that are fiercer. So people will travel here to bike, to play. And I think that recreation trail is fabulous. I want to make sure that Jerry Smith corridor gets a mention too. Thanks.
Thank you, ma'am. Any other public speakers?
Levon Stone, Photo and Environmental Justice. I just want to remind you all that the respect for other ethnic groups need to be included. Everybody is not a biker or a hiker. And young African American teenagers, and I talk to them every day, they ride bicycles as a mode of transportation, but they're not really into just biking around the world or around the country. And none of that has been included in what we're doing here. It's just that, okay, this is what we want to do because we are the ones in charge, and it doesn't matter about any other ethnic groups or the African Americans or whatever. That is the part that saddens me. that when we come up and we talk or we bring forward other concerns from other parts of the community, it's disrespected. And the disrespect needs to stop. We don't all have to agree on everything, but you certainly should respect other people's points of view that are not in the in circle.
Thank you, ma'am. Any other public speakers?
I want to thank the FORA board for being talking about these trails and being active and being interested about it. Your map 3.6-1, which was unfortunately not shown, has been there in the base reuse plan since 1997 with this spleen and these corridors, not just little piddly bike paths, but these robust open space corridors and wildlife links and ways for people to get around that are very exciting. I just came back from a road/camping trip up all the way to the Canadian border in Montana and Utah, Wyoming, not Wyoming. People are excited about their trails, and these little mining trails and little obscure forgotten places are starting to get revitalized based on putting in trailheads, putting in promenades along rivers, having ways for people to get off the highway and go into the woods. It is a very hot topic, probably what golf was 100 years ago as far as designing golf courses. Outdoor recreation has taken a different leg. It's retired people, it's very young people, it's handicapped people, walking, biking, horses, using open space in ways that are new and very exciting. As far as how widespread is the use of outdoor recreation and enjoyment of it, poor people, disadvantaged people, people who in their ethnic group have not historically used certain types of recreation or what have you, sorts of groups, very much stand to benefit from something like this. I see the Latino families using parks. They're great users of parks. Latinos use open space like most of us don't really out there on a Sunday. Parks are cheap, they're fun, they're good, they get people out moving. It's very good for health, diabetes, obesity, to get people moving in our communities. And it's good for the brain. It creates an energy and a vibrancy. This is very much to be encouraged. I just wanted to point out also, as far as what Tom Moore was saying, that most of the land depicted in that FORTAG map already is open space or existing trails. It's a matter of linkage more than anything else. And I'm sure that jurisdictions can come together and make that happen. It's an incredible goal and very promising for this area. I just encourage the FORA board to think big and creatively. It's not economic development either or as far as these trails. Economic development gravitates towards outdoor recreation, open space, and trails nowadays. And that is a reality. That's something that we should be really jumping on and taking advantage of. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Any other public speakers? Seeing none, public comment period is closed. Back to the board. Any last-minute comments by board members? Seeing none, this is an information item. We'll deem the report received. Last business item we have for today is a request to authorize to execute a letter of unconditional commitment. I'll turn this over to, it's a legal action primarily. I'll turn this over to our attorney counsel, Mr. John Giffen, to explain the action. John.
Thank you, Chair. Members of the board, during the course of your consideration and ultimate passing of the Preston Park resolution, the city of Marina on June the 12th wrote a letter to the board and accused it of violating the Brown Act and asked the board to cease and desist from violating the Brown Act. Following that, our office, my office, wrote a strong letter. The Brown Act allegation just said you've been engaging in secret deliberations, you've been legislating in connection with the Preston Park resolution, and that's a violation. Our letter responded to those accusations on June the 19th, and strongly refuted all of the letter and pointed out to counsel for Marina that the deliberations about Preston Park were strictly litigation strategy related, that there was no such legislation, that the matter had been properly noticed and properly vetted and in open session, and that no such violation of the Brown Act existed. And that is a strong opinion that I continue to maintain, is that there was never a violation of the Brown Act. That being said, as your authority counsel, in order to protect the board and protect FORA, there is an option that we have to respond to that cease and desist letter, and that is to issue our own letter telling Marina that we would not discuss the Preston Park resolution any further. We can issue this letter without admitting any violation of the Brown Act, and some of you might say, well, if we didn't violate the Brown Act, why do we need to do this? It's simply a method, an option that you have to completely insulate yourself from any unnecessary expense or further litigation, and would be a straight defense to any lawsuit that is forthcoming from Marina to completely insulate the board. So it's an option. The specific letter that is attached to the board packet is a little bit different than the one that I show on the overhead here. Essentially, the board, you have three options to, number one, pass or send the letter as it exists in the board packet, which basically says we're going to stop discussing, we will cease and desist from discussing at all in the future any Preston Park resolution related item in closed session. We can send that letter, and that would do the trick in terms of insulating us going forward. It would also hamstring us a little bit from discussing in closed session the Preston Park resolution. I'm really not certain we need to talk about the Preston Park resolution anymore because we passed it and we're acting on it. We have a cross complaint that's going to be filed next week or in the very near term, and we may not need to further talk about it. The option that I give you on the overhead above is to insert language that does give us the option to talk about the Preston Park resolution going forward in closed session if there is some impact on the litigation. So we can do one of three things. We can we can send the letter saying that we will not discuss it any further. We would not discuss the Preston Park resolution any further. We can send a letter as modified above, or we can choose not to send any letter. My recommendation would be to send the letter that we have above, as it allows us to continue to talk about the resolution. Not sure we're going to need it necessarily, but if we part of the government code pursuant to which the letter is issued says that if we do want to talk about the resolution going forward, we have to give Marina 30 days notice of that, and we simply may not have the kind of time given that we're going to go to trial in the case between now and the end of the year. I would recommend that we have that we send the letter as modified above, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Okay, the bottom line is there's no admission of wrongdoing, and we save litigation expenses. So any questions by board members? Saying none, out to the public. Any questions by members of the public? Back to the board and entertain a motion, please. Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't see you. Please.
I was a little slow thinking about it. I appreciate the effort, and I, as a resident of Marina, and I hope that you never, ever have to go through this again with a member of the FORA board, that you do not find yourself in any kind of lawsuit with members of your own board. I just want to say that. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other members of the public? Any other members? Saying none, public comment period's closed. Back to the board. Entertain a motion, please.
I'd move we send the letter as amended.
Supervisor Potter made the motion, seconded by Mayor Rubio. Any discussion on the motion?
Just briefly to it, I think we need the ability to be able to discuss it in closed session, especially in case there's some sort of potential for settlement, and I wouldn't want you to not have the direction of this body in representing us in any of those matters.
Well said. Any other discussion? Yes, Councilmember Lucius first.
Just one question. So with the amended version, would the last paragraph continue to be in the letter? The last paragraph talks about rescinding the commitment.
John?
The last paragraph would not be included.
Would not be included.
Would not be included.
Would not be included.
Right.
Any other questions or discussion?
No.
Councilmember Amadeo.
I thought that the last paragraph was included in order to be in compliant with government code. So I'm not sure that I understand how it cannot be included. If you can explain, please.
Mr. Giffen.
Bear with me one second. Yeah, I'm sorry. That paragraph is definitely going to be included in the letter. Yeah.
The last paragraph will be included.
Yeah, sorry.
Two good questions.
No number. It just it's the one that allows the FORA board to rescind the commitment that it's making above by a majority vote.
Rescind. Okay.
It's
I get it.
Okay. Mayor Pro Tem Ogilvie.
Just to be clear, we went around a couple of things, and I think someone mentioned that we shouldn't be in a position of being sued by one of our members. Marina is suing FORA, not over this issue right here about the resolution. So we didn't put ourselves into this. We're trying to clean it up, and I think our council has given us wise counsel, and I think we'll try to do better in the future and be more transparent in the future. So we're trying to respect Marina, and we're trying to respect the FORA board's authority. So I appreciate the council.
Thank you. Any other discussion by the board members? Yes.
I just wanted to clarify. The reason I ask about the last paragraph is because if I understood it right, with this amendment that's in blue, we can keep the last paragraph, but we wouldn't be required to do the 30-day notice. Is that right?
We would be required to have the 30-day. If we rescind what we're saying above, we would give them 30 days notice.
What was
With the amendment.
I'm sorry.
With the amendment, you don't really need a majority vote to discuss the resolution in the context of a lawsuit. You would need it to discuss it for other purposes.
Right.
That's correct.
Okay.
Any other questions? The law is so clear in the way it's all worded. I love it. Okay. Seeing no further discussion, all in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Anybody opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you very much. Okay, next we have the public comment period. Any member of the public may address the board on any item not on the agenda. You've got 3 minutes. Please come forward. Yes, ma'am.
I'm Jane Haynes, and I want to address you about the Veterans Cemetery. There's 1 week left for public comment. I've already submitted my comment, and I want to tell you about it and why I did it and what I'd like you to do about it. There'll be a lot of first of all, it's a 16.9 acre parcel. They're going to remove over 300 trees. It's probably necessary to remove over 300 trees to do this. I have no problem with that if it's done carefully. But when they wrote the mitigated negative declaration, they didn't put any mitigation in for removing the trees or for doing anything on the cemetery with regard to the coastal oaks. So what I said in my comment is that I would like them to comply with the base reuse plan standards for protecting coastal oaks, and that I would also like them to publish their landscape plan, which I requested on 24 days ago, June the 18th. They still haven't provided it to me. And because they're stonewalling me, I've written them 2 letters about it. I've called them about it. I still can't get their landscape plan that I requested. And because, in my experience, FORA doesn't stonewall at all. When I ask FORA for information, I get it right away, usually the same day. It's a wonderful organization as far as providing information and being receptive to information. So one of the things I asked for is that they would post in my recommendation, that they would post the landscape plan on the FORA website. Second, that they would add a mitigation that would be consistent with the base reuse plan. And those are the 2 things I put in my recommendation. I subsequently came across, the day after I sent it in, I came across 2 studies that FORA has commissioned. One of them is a forestry study that has excellent recommendations for how you put replacement trees in and you don't harm them and so on and so forth. Subsequently, after that report was written, that was written in 2011, 2012, CalVet adopted an engineering plan, doesn't even mention this forestry report. There's nothing in there. So I want to amend my recommendation to add that 3rd component, saying, would you look at this forestry report that FORA has commended? So I'm not asking that anything be delayed. I'm not asking that for an EIR. I'm asking that the whole process go forward just as it is, but with one addition, and that's that a mitigation be there for the coastal oak plans. And what I'm asking you today is, I hope that FORA will send a similar letter asking for the same thing. Obviously, I'm being stonewalled, so I'm not going to make any difference. I have an appointment with Senator
Time is
Tamani.
up.
Okay, I have an appointment with Senator Tamani. I'm trying to get him to, and I hope that Seaside will also send a letter to CalVet making these 3 recommendations, because it's going to be mostly in your territory. So I'm just trying to get some other people to make the same recommendation I did in the hope that it will be taken seriously. Thanks.
Our executive officer will study that and get back to you on that.
Levon Stone, FORA Environmental Justice Network. We are a statewide organization, FORA Environmental Justice Network, and we're here to represent our local community, the people who live here, and that's what we do. We have continued to work very hard over these years. We have attended meetings, workshops. We have sent in documentations, letters. We have talked about the reuse plan over and over again, whether one of you were here or not. This has been going on ever since 1994. And to still be standing here looking at what is happening to our community, listening to everybody talk about the people that's going to come in here, and to disregard and disrespect the people who live here, that's not a good working relationship. And we have tried to work with all the organizations. The people here in this room do not represent all of the other people out there in our community that are very disappointed with the way they have been treated and that the way they are being treated. Something is going to have to be done to deal with this situation. We have to talk with every agency, federal, state, local groups. We have been doing that for years. We represent people as mayors, city council members, senators, congressmen, those people we help to elect, not only for those who have the loudest voices or the most money, but to represent all of their constituents. And that is not happening. I hope that this situation is going to change. We are not the problem. We have the right for information. We have the right to participate. We have the right to be recognized and to live in our community and to be economically stable and to have our concerns addressed. Whether anybody agrees with that or not, those are our rights as human beings, as citizens, and as community members. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Next speaker, please.
Good afternoon, Chair Edelin, board members and staff. Ron Cheshire with the Monterey Santa Cruz Building and Construction Trades Council. In front of you, you have a 6-page document, and at the top of it, it says grammatical interpretation. Okay, it's stapled together. Please go down a little further and look at Article 1.02, Enforcement of the Master Resolution. I bring this up because litigation should not be the way to solve disputes here at FORA all the time. From time to time, it's had to been used, but I think after a couple court rulings and such, in regards to some labor issues and possibly other issues that may be out there, if you read this whole section, you will find out that there are individuals responsible for enforcement of the master resolution other than FORA itself. Ultimately, your executive director is responsible, but there have been some people mentioned. Now, the 5 landholders, the county, Dave, you're gone. I'll see you at happy hour. The city of Seaside, the city of Marina, the city of Monterey, and the city of Delray Oaks are all landholders, and their police chiefs or sheriff are responsible for enforcing the master resolution if someone has violated the master resolution. I only bring this to your attention because, and I won't mention any names, but I did go to lunch with the sheriff one day. Oh, excuse me. No. The sheriff was quite receptive. It was one of his aides that when I told him, do you understand what 1.02 of the master resolution says? It says you're responsible for enforcing the master resolution if there's a violation. And he goes, what, you're crazy. He goes, who told us we had to do that? We're not going to do that. I'm going to send a letter to council. I go, send a letter to the council, whatever you want to do. I go, send it to any attorney. You're going to get 3 different opinions anyway. So, sorry, Mr. Giffen. But anyway, it just, it's my humble opinion that there may be some misunderstanding or maybe just total, they may not have the information. The executive director of FORA, I would highly recommend that you bring together the law enforcement entities and the personnel that are responsible and maybe run them through this a little bit. Like I said, litigation's not the way to go all the time. We don't want to do it. We're already hearing some abuses that are taking place within FORA itself. We do have 2 court decisions with us, but court's not the way to do it. It's too expensive, too time-consuming, not only for
time
us,
is up.
but for the developers. The time was up a while back. Thank you for the extra time.
Thank you, sir.
And Jan Schreiner, resident of Marina. Once again, I want to clarify about the lawsuit comment. I understand that Marina did take that action as a member of FORA, Marina representatives felt it was the only option to protect the interests of the current residents of Marina, including those of Preston Park. But I also appreciate FORA's effort to improve the relations at this point, but you have to recall a loan was made without consideration of the content and the spirit of conveyance. So Marina has representatives that need to protect the interests of the residents of Marina in a very direct way. And I very much appreciate that effort. And I respect, and I hope that you will respect, all the residents and representatives of Marina. They deserve it as hardworking people trying to have a peaceful, prosperous town longing to the future. I recall the last time I was able to come to one of these meetings, the mayor of our town talking about $68 million in land sales to benefit FORA, $65 million coming out of the town of Marina. We've given an awful lot as a community to the well-being of the region, and we deserve the respect, at least for that Marina has given a lot. Marina is a big contributor, and that deserves respect. In a California Special Districts Association meeting, I asked Assemblyman Monning why he would want to extend FORA when FORA appears to have done so much damage to our community. And he said, that's a good question, that's a good question. Why would we want to extend a governing body that does harm to your community? That's a very good question. Thank you for that question.
Thank you, ma'am. Any other public comment? Any other public comment? Okay, public comment period is closed. Next, we go to the executive officer's report. Michael?
Yes, Chair Edelin, on a positive note, a couple of really important items. The Habitat Conservation Plan update notes that we have pretty much agreement on a product which we will move forward on. We talked about that earlier today. August 1st is the deadline for comments and responses to get back in order for that final document to be prepared. That also includes in that report the fact that jurisdictions are now reviewing the Joint Powers Authority for participation if they want to gain the protections of the Habitat Conservation Plan. We need to have those approvals back by the end of August. And I just want to highlight that because this is a very positive comment about getting a published HCP. I want to thank Senator Monning's office for their help in making sure to get all the parties to agree to that. Another item of importance, I think, is the capital improvement program, which is provided for each of you at your table today. The one that was approved, that's a formal copy of that. And the last item was there was a mention about there's a public correspondence item at the end. We will be responding to the Veterans Cemetery environmental documents. We have a few comments that we will be making, and we'll be sending those forward probably by middle of next week. They'll all be staff technical comments.
Any questions of Mr. Hulamard? Seeing none, any items from members? Yes, Mayor Rubio.
Yeah, you know, I don't want to get involved in jurisdiction versus jurisdiction disputes and claims of you know, who's doing more for what. But you know, the city of Seaside has contributed a lot to this effort here at FORA, and much of the work that has been done in Marina has been due to the monies that have been poured into FORA from the city of Seaside. And I just don't want anybody to lose sight of that. Sure, everybody's, you know, working at this together, but it's because it's a regional effort, and we all agreed to do that. And for this to work, everybody has to keep on doing that. We've put our share in, and we just want a little bit of it back so we can clean up our the blighted properties, so that we can continue doing what we're doing. We're not begrudging anybody anything, but we just want to give and get back, you know, equally. Thank you.
Any other items from members? Mayor Pro Tem Oglesby.
Through the chair, and I agree with the mayor, and this what leads to these comments that we're having tonight, where you're having good citizens of the city of Marina mention why would we extend FORA board. Well, when you think about it, the city of Marina signed on like every other jurisdiction to extend the FORA board. You see how confusing it gets? Just when we want to denigrate people, we forget that the city of Marina, like every other jurisdiction, signed on to the extension. So you can only take it so far till you start making, making no sense. So I don't want to get in who's better. We're all the same. We're all working together. But that's what it extends to when you have good citizens making those type of comments.
Any other items from members? Saying none, ladies and gentlemen, we are adjourned. Next board meeting will be August 8th. We'll see you all then. Enjoy it until then.